Okay, and we are in the open session.
Okay, Madam Clerk, shall we call the roll?
Alameda County.
I'm much more open, I'm sure.
Albany.
Whatever we can do, let's.
Here.
Berkeley.
Here.
Dublin.
Here.
Emeryville.
Here.
Fremont. Okay. For the record, Alameda County is present. Hayward.
Here.
Livermore.
Here.
Pleasanton.
Here.
San Leandro.
Present.
It looks
Tracy.
open. The problem is at my workplace.
Union City.
Tuesdays and Thursdays are the days.
Community Advisory Committee. The Community Advisory Committee is online. I believe there's just microphone issues. Thank you, and you have a quorum.
Okay. I'm sorry, does someone have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I don't know if I heard the city of Newark called.
I apologize. Newark is present. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. We don't want to forget you. Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. We have a quorum. We are now going to adjourn into closed session. And then after closed session is over, we will come back into open session and report out if there's anything to report out and continue with the agenda. So for board members, you're being asked to hang up from this meeting and go to the appropriate link for the closed session which you received. Thank you.
Stephanie, I'm on. Alameda
Supervisor
County.
Haggerty. Yes, thank you.
I see, so you'll call me.
It'll be noted for the roll call.
Would you be kind enough to resend the link to the closed session to me, please?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
One moment. Thank you, and the recording has been resumed.
Should I wait to call the meeting back to order until we have a quorum in here?
Yes, please. It looks like it's building quickly.
Okay, just let me know.
Thank you, and you have a quorum.
Thank you. Just calling this meeting back to order. And Ender, are you there to report out of closed session? Do we have our general counsel on yet?
I do not see them on the list yet.
And folks at home, our chair, Dan, had to step off and take a call, so I will be guiding the meeting for a bit. So thank you for your patience tonight. We just ended closed session and are just waiting on our general counsel to report out.
Perhaps we should just come back to that agenda item once she returns.
All right, I'm going to table this for a moment. All right, so that brings us to public comment. This item is reserved for persons wishing to address the board on any EBCE related matters that are not otherwise on this meeting agenda. Public comments on matters listed on the agenda shall be heard at the time the matter is called. As with all public comment, members of the public who wish to address the board are customarily limited to 3 minutes per speaker and must complete an electronic speaker slip. So, Stephanie, do we have any speaker slips submitted for public comment?
Yes, we have 5 speakers for public comment. Jessica Tovar, Tom Kelly, Seda Dumas Dogan, Blair Beekman, and Alita Dupree.
Okay. Do we have our first speaker?
Yes, it'll be just a moment. I see that General Counsel has joined as an attendee. So let me promote them. Okay, Seda Dumas, you're unmuted.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hi, this is Jada Durmaz-Dogan with Local Clean Energy Alliance. In April, you listened to the public and rejected PG&E's nuclear offer. I would like to thank the board again for their decision. And I also would like to update you about other CCA's decisions. We were able to find information about 13 out of 21 community choice programs in California. 8 of those CCAs rejected nuclear. 2 of them already had a policy in place that prevents their staff from procuring nuclear energy. Only 3 of them accepted nuclear. Inspired by the East Bay Clean Power Alliance's organizing efforts, activists in Sonoma County quickly organized to bring this issue to public attention. Within a couple of days, over 100 customers submitted comments to urge their governing board to vote against accepting PG&E's nuclear energy offer. The board listened to what the public demanded and voted 11-0 to reject Diablo Canyon nuclear energy. Also, the activists on the Central Coast requested a special meeting after learning about Monterey Bay Community Power's decision to accept nuclear energy. Their governing board voted 12-3 last Wednesday to reject Diablo Canyon nuclear energy in 2020. So that was my update. Thanks again for making the right decision.
Thank you. Can we get the next speaker, please?
Tovar, you are unmuted.
Hi, okay, great. You guys can hear me. This is Jessica Tovar, Local Clean Energy Alliance. And I wanted to say that the Local Clean Energy Alliance works for equity and clean energy, and in the spirit of the Black Lives Matter movement and uprising, I feel the need to define what we mean by equity and who exactly are these vulnerable communities. Black, Indigenous, people of color, low income, disabled, elderly, youth, immigrants, renters, and the unhoused community. Folks who are systematically excluded, made invisible, dumped on, marginalized, and often sacrificed for people of privilege to reap the benefits. We advocated for a local development business plan to bring community benefits to reach these very communities. We call on East Bay Community Energy to uplift these communities within their investments, hiring, and contracting. And this includes for also the East Bay Community Energy staff hires. Not doing so is participating and perpetuating the very systematic practices of racism that we must dismantle in order to bring justice to our East Bay most vulnerable communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Can we get our next speaker, please?
Hello, this is Blair Beekman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you. I had a good meeting experience Monday at the CAC. It was just, it was nice to hear the public input at that meeting. It was really nice. It was really impressive. And I feel it was a good communication and relationship and just the back and forth of how to talk about issues of local energy. And I really hope the board takes the advice of the public that they hear and takes it to heart. I am new to these things. My knowledge is really thin and weak, but you know, the way people spoke about things was really nice and knowledgeable. And you know, I just hope I can offer a certain amount of heart for these matters at this time. There was, at the CAC meeting, it was mentioned that there's going to be trouble with renewables in this next year. I don't know the depth of the issue, but it reminded me that it has possibly something to do with the deal that you had made with PG&E this year. And it was very nicely spoken by the first person that she gave examples of areas that rejected the deal. And that was just nice to hear as an everyday person, you know, how I can have choices, how to think and work better. I mean, it was just a feeling that we're kind of stuck with it here in the East Bay and in San Jose area where I'm originally from. And, you know, it was just kind of dumped onto us and we didn't seem to have much choice, and it would hurt. It was hurtful. And I hope, you know, we're really making commitments to work out of that. And, you know, in being from San Jose, I was able to understand that, you know, in the next few years, you know, we really have a chance to build something really, really positive. And I hope, you know, that we're, as, you know, you kind of said, you're, you know, consolidating things at this time. And from this consolidation process, I really hope you can see what's really, truly positive and sustainable for our future. And that we all can work towards that. And that's my heartfelt words that I can offer while good people speak of knowledge and just good practices and good stuff. And I hope we can have a good relationship. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you, Blair. Okay, that moves us on to our consent agenda. Stephanie, are there any submitted speaker cards for the consent agenda?
I'm sorry, Tom Kelly just raised his hand and he also wanted to speak during public comment.
Okay, I will allow it. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. If I can remind speakers to also please state where they're calling from. Okay, Tom, you have access to your microphone.
All right, how's that?
Great, we can hear you.
Thank you, Stephanie. I just wanted to ask the staff and the board to take a little bit more of an expansive view of the Brown Act requirements for public meetings. And I say that because on Monday I contacted staff to try and get the attachments associated with item 17 on tonight's agenda. Turned out to be 89 pages, so it was substantial. And those documents weren't posted until about 3 o'clock on Monday, which was short of the 72-hour requirement. Now, staff said that this item has been discussed on several occasions by the board and a committee. However, if you actually take a look at what came out of, was posted this week, there are some fairly substantial changes that are being recommended. And I say as a member of the public who, you know, tries to advocate on behalf of the things that are important to many of us, and also on behalf of perhaps the board who are also overwhelmed with so many things confronting cities today, that we actually get these materials out to people so they have an opportunity to consider them and to you know, weigh in on them in an appropriate fashion. And I would say that having surveyed a number of other CCAs, they generally do get their documents out well in advance of the meeting and you know, are able to provide them to the public so that they can participate in a meaningful way. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to remind folks that you should, in case you haven't, please fill out a speaker card online before you raise your hands. But I believe we have one more speaker left. Is that right, Stephanie?
That is correct. Alita Dupree. And your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you, Vice Chair Martinez. Alita Dupree, for the record. my pronouns are she and her. Yeah, I almost thought I was going to get passed over, but I did fill out the speaker card. Thank you for turning the mic on. So this work is very, very important to me. And we're getting into summer season. Power demand is going up, so it's going to be challenging to source electricity. And so I ask of you to continue the work in sourcing electricity and to be a part of the conversation to ensure that we don't have to curtail renewables. Now, I know that is not something that you handle yourselves. That's on a bigger scale and often constrained by the grid. But electric rates are indeed high in California. I am not in Oakland right now, though when I'm in your service area, I am sleeping and spending much time in Oakland. And so it's a problem that you've inherited and it won't be solved in a day. So I appreciate the work that you're doing, at least on the generation side of the house, to keep power rates in check. So certainly getting more renewables online, and conservation is very, very important. Right now I am sitting in front of an interesting device called a swamp cooler, which is very good for keeping small areas or even big areas cool through the evaporation of water blown across a medium, and the evaporation brings cool air into the space. It uses much, much less electricity than air conditioning. And time of use can be a very helpful means for us to try to, quote, flatten the so-called duck curve in the afternoons when power demand gets very high and electricity gets expensive, and all kinds of not so nice things result from that. Continue your advocacy for helping to keep the power system running. I don't want us to have to go through public safety power shutoffs again. And I know that was not under your control, but be a strong voice in that, because nobody should have to have their power shut off. And lastly, I would like to just remind of a vulnerable community that is often not mentioned. And that is the community of service-disabled veterans. There are approximately 4 million individuals who served in the United States Armed Forces who are disabled as a result from service. So let's keep them in mind in helping to ensure that they can access power affordably and equitably. And I thank you.
Thank you, Alita. Stephanie, are there any more public comments at this time?
There are no more public comments.
Yes. All right.
I am showing Colin Miller has his hand raised. Colin, I only show you signed up for item 15.
Okay.
Okay,
So yes, if you've submitted your information, then go ahead and raise your hand at that specific item. And with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda, and I will ask if any members of the board have items to pull or discuss. And I see hands raised. So I've got Ed Hernandez. I don't believe I have the ability to unmute you, Ed.
I'm good. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, item number 9, the minutes. Just want to make an amendment to add that the general counsel does not have signing authority. That's the only modification to the consent agenda that I would have for that item.
Okay.
To the minutes.
Okay, thank you. And then I believe Nick Pilch, did you want to speak to something?
Not to an item, but a point of order. The introduction of the electronic cards for speaking is new, it seems, and I wanted to ask staff why that was. I'm concerned about the additional barrier to public participation here, added on to the fact that our materials were a little bit delayed as well.
Stephanie, would you be able to respond to the process for submitting for public comment, please?
Sure, absolutely. So with the March 18th meeting, we did begin an online public speaker comment card. Speakers are asked to go online and sign up with their email, select the meeting body, meeting date, and also the item that they would like to speak to. They have the option to submit comments only, to submit comments and speak at the meeting, or to select to speak at the meeting. They also have the option to email those comments in advance of the meeting to cob@ebce.org. Those are available on our website on the public meeting site and is posted directly above the joining site for each meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for your concern, Director Pilch, but we have had this process in place since we went into shelter in place. And so let's see, I would like to, Director Hernandez from San Leandro, would you like to make a motion without item 9 so we can address that with our general counsel?
Yes, we can. I so moved.
Second.
That sounds like a second from the Mayor of Berkeley.
Yes.
So would the clerk please call the roll?
I'm sorry, can you please clarify? Director Hernandez referenced item 9 as the minutes. Are you holding item?
We're pulling item 9. So
The First Amendment? Okay.
Yes. The motion is on all of the other items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Alameda County,
Yes.
Berkeley,
Yes.
Dublin, Fremont,
Yes.
Hayward,
Yes.
Livermore,
Yes.
Newark, Pleasanton,
Yes.
San Leandro,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Union City.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes with those present.
Oh, I'll vote too. Yes.
Oh, sorry, Emeryville. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And Albany.
Oh,
How did I miss Albany? I apologize for that.
Okay, so item 9, thank you, Member Hernandez from San Leandro for bringing that to our attention. And I just want to make sure that our general counsel confers on this.
So this is item 9, the recurve agreement?
Actually, it's more about the minutes of the agenda from the last. So that I think there we discussed about the general counsel.
Yeah, we noted that general counsel does not, actually I should say the general counsel signing authority for contracts was in place when you had an in-house general counsel so that she could directly contract with outside counsel. It's not general contracting authority, but it would have been specific to outside counsel. I do not exercise that signing authority as contract general counsel, but you may want to keep it on the books for a future in-house general counsel, as that would be standard.
So Member Hernandez, are you recommending that a change be made to the contract in item 9?
No, it turns out it was the minutes.
Yeah, so the minutes just omitted the strikeout in the sponsorship agreements that general counsel would have authority to sign 50,000. And it was minutes of discussion. We struck that out.
Would have no signing authority for sponsorship agreements. That is correct.
And in correspondence with the clerk, she said just to make sure that we amend that to ensure that the general counsel does not have that signing authority, and that's fine. So we just want to call that out in the minutes.
Okay, great. Sorry, I got confused with the item 9 reference because that's an agreement.
Sorry about that. Let's go back.
So
Minutes,
now,
I think, are item 6.
Item 9, we may need you to take a separate vote on that one.
So I'd like to move adoption of item 9.
I saw a mouth move, but I didn't hear your voice, Jerry. Okay, so we have a motion from Director Arreguín and a second from Director Penton on item 9. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alameda County,
Aye.
Albany,
Food out here?
Yes.
Do you want food out here or?
Berkeley,
Yes.
Dublin, Fremont,
Yes.
Hayward,
Yes.
Livermore,
Yes.
Newark, Piedmont, Pleasanton,
Yes.
San Leandro,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Union City,
Yes.
Emeryville.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
And then apologize for this, but do we need to redo the motion on the consent agenda to accommodate that fix, Stephanie, in the minutes?
If it's okay with the board, I can word it as it was voted as amended to include the general counsel does not have signing authority and maintain the first, second, and the full vote.
Can I just get a thumbs up from everyone I can see? Thank you. Let's not go through that again.
Thank you.
That moves us to our regular agenda, and that is our CEO report at item 10. And I'll hand it over to you, Nick.
Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong screen. Stephanie, are you going to bring up the CEO report onto the screen? I think it takes a minute. I have something if it's coming up. Great. Great. So we did have an executive committee meeting on May 22nd. It was predominantly focused on the draft budget and the integrated resource plan. Our next meeting is Friday, the 26th of June. We also had a finance and administration committee meeting that it was actually held on June 12th. Also reviewing the budget. Our next from the marketing and marketing, regulatory, and legislative side of things, our next meeting is on August 6th. We did have a meeting on May 21st, focusing on an update from our marketing team and our policy team. So here we go. Yep. So I actually ask Annie if you're there to quickly walk us through our May rate updates. No? Okay.
I'm promoting her to panelist now.
Or if Annie, let me go through it, Annie, if you're having some.
No, I apologize. I'm having some technical difficulties. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So if we go back up a little bit, so we in May, PG&E updated the PCIA as well as their generation rates. We were able to update our rates, put those in place with an effective date of May 1. So current bills are currently showing the appropriate value proposition of 1.5% discount for Bright Choice, parity for Brilliant 100, and a penny over PG&E's rates for Renewable 100. So that is all currently up to date. And
Annie, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm having a very hard time hearing you. I'm wondering if you could get closer to your microphone or.
Annie, let me do it. It's fine.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay. So we did have some on May 1st. In May, we did update our rates to reflect the new PCIA. So that those new updated rates are on our rates page. Those rates do continue to reflect our current value proposition, though, of a 1.5% discount for Bright Choice. I would say, some of the major work, next page of the report, please. Some of the major work we did over the last month in the marketing space was really focusing on communicating and educating our customers about the CARE program. The CARE program is a state-funded program that offers customers up to a 35% discount on their electricity. The program has historically been focused on low-income customers, but since the COVID crisis has started, this program eligibility has been expanded to include furloughed or recently laid off employees. And so with this expansion, we think that there are, quite a few more of our customers who might be eligible for this benefit. And so we've been doing, a number of outreach efforts to try to create more awareness. One has been launching a dedicated page. So we have almost 3,000 page views in the last month, little over a month on our page there, with 7% of those visitors clicking through to enroll in the seek to submit an application. We've also been running a really interesting pilot program where we're doing outbound phone calls. So we focused initially on 100 customers who were late in their bill payment. And so, we thought those 100 might be good candidates to learn more about the CARE program. We were able to reach 50% of those customers, and it reported a total increase in enrollment of 5%. I think what's interesting there is, these are, small numbers, but, I think when we think that, if 10% of the customers we reach successfully enroll, it's worth following up. So we're expanding the pilot to 200 customers, and that's currently underway. Overall, though, we are seeing a trend in an overall increase of 10% in CARE enrollment. This is a bit of an eye chart, I know, but from really the beginning of April, we've seen, at the beginning of April, we had roughly 85 to 90,000 customers on CARE, and now we have close to 105. So it's 10,000 customers more or less have signed up for the program. And I won't take credit at EBC for all 10,000, but I do think that, our efforts to publicize it through promoted advertising, social media, through outbound calls, and through just general sort of efforts to make greater awareness has contributed to this increased participation, which is at the end of the day is saving people money. So that is that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions or comments from the board regarding the CEO report? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Stephanie, are there any public comments?
Yes, I have one speaker, Blair Beekman.
Okay.
Okay, Blair, can you please raise your hand so it'll bump you to the top of the list? I believe Blair must have dropped off the call. I'm not seeing their name in the list.
Okay, we can take that comment later if Blair reappears. Okay, seeing no questions or comments, thank you for your report, CEO. That moves us to item 11. It's the Community Advisory Committee report, and I believe we have Jane with us tonight, but I don't see her on my video spread. Do you?
Madam Chair, she's on the attendee list, so she needs to be made a panelist.
Yes. Stephanie, can you bump up Jane French, please? I see her hand raised.
Yes. Just a moment.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you and see you.
Great, thank you. Jane Frank, Vice Chair of the Community Advisory Council. Chair Sutter is out of town this week. The only thing I want to say outside of the agenda is just recognizing CAC member Brenda Thomas, who completed her last meeting with us on Monday and completed her 2-year term of service representing Oakland, and just want to publicly recognize her service and thank her for that. And that's all.
Great, thank you, Jane, and thank you, Brenda, for your service. In case you're listening, we all appreciate the work that you've put in. So let's see, we don't have any public comment on this item, do we, Stephanie?
We do not, and I just wanted to remind us that we have not heard the report out of council from closed session.
Oh, thank you. Let's take this opportunity to head back to Inder. Would you kindly report out of our closed session meeting so we could wrap that?
Sure. Sorry, I was a couple minutes late to the getting back to the regular meeting. There is nothing to report out of closed session. Direction was provided to the negotiating committee.
Okay, very good. And that dovetails into our next item, which is item 12, consideration of a merit bonus for the Chief Executive Officer pursuant to the employment agreement between East Bay Community Energy and Nicholas Chassett, dated October 17th, 2018, and amended effective December 16th, 2019. So this is wrapping up an issue that we discussed in closed session, and I will be looking for a motion, please.
Chair, pardon me, Chair, we do have 3 speakers on this item.
Oh, let's go to public comment first. I apologize.
Thank you. Jessica Tovar, Tom Kelly, and Audrey Ichinose. Hey, Audrey, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Given the conditions facing EBCE's many communities during this pandemic and the systemic issues raised by the widespread Black Lives Matter protests, I want to ask if there is another way to recognize and laud CEO Chassett's performance. I don't know the details of his contract, and maybe there is no wiggle room. But given EBCE's nonprofit status, its community-based character, actions involving monetary rewards or awards at this time, I don't think are advisable. Finding another means of recognition would help to bolster the community's confidence in EBCE. And avoiding monetary awards could also be part of a wider pledge to be discussed later on during the budget question to sort of cap or freeze personnel compensation for this financial year out of respect for and solidarity with Alameda County communities. I fail to identify myself. I live in Berkeley, and I am a member of the East Bay Clean Power Alliance. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Audrey. We'll take the next speaker, please.
Just very quickly, this is Jessica Tovar again. I just also want to echo, similar to what Audrey just said, is that this is probably not a good time for a bonus, especially for higher up employees of the agency. Just noting that a lot of institutions right now have freezes on salary and bonuses because of the financial situation. And, you know, I just want to highlight, like, I personally know a lot of people who have abruptly lost their job due to the shutdown because of COVID-19 and still have not to this day received a check from unemployment. And that's how bad the situation is right now. And so I really want to echo that this agency not be tone deaf to the situation that is affecting our community at this moment. And so that's it. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Jessica. I believe we have Tom Kelly next.
Thank you. Thank you. Tom Kelly from Berkeley. You know, the optics on this are terrible. And I have to believe that the board sees that as well. Our cities are struggling with homelessness, COVID-19, falling revenues, you know, and the public perception of this, I feel, once, you know, this becomes more public, is going to be terrible. And I think that maybe Nick's contract allows for some kind of bonus at some point, but if, I mean, there should be some kind of consideration for the crisis we're facing, including the impacts that we see on falling revenues on our proposed next fiscal year budget. So I've got to say, I mean, I would put this on a back burner until a more appropriate time. Thank you.
And Stephanie, did we have one more?
Colin Miller lowered his hand, or their hand, I apologize. They are not signed up for this item. They have signed up for item 15 though.
Okay. So, as I said, I'm open for a motion. I have Nick Pilch.
Hi, I'm not going to make a motion, but I just want to state that I support the CEO's performance in leading the agency and his leadership and guiding us through some really difficult times and difficult decisions to make. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Arreguín.
Thank you very much. Well, I just want to speak on behalf of the board by saying that I think Mr. Chassett has done an incredible job. He is a leader in the area of renewable energy in the state of California and is helping lead other CCAs. We're fortunate to have him and his experience and expertise to help lead our agency. And Madam Chair, I don't know if you'd like to make the motion, but I just want to sort of state that I understand the economic circumstances that we're facing. My city is facing a $35 million budget deficit. We've instituted a hiring freeze. We are looking at significant reductions in expenditures. I know many public agencies are looking at that similarly. We know many of our ratepayers are also struggling, which is why a subsequent item about continuing the relief that we've provided them to ensure that we don't shut off power is extremely important. And that's something that Mr. Chassett implemented in recognition of the economic challenges that our ratepayers are facing. But I do think we should demonstrate to our CEO, who's done a good job, that he should be compensated accordingly. And I will just note that if you look at the compensation of other CEOs of other CCAs in the state of California, I think this is a reasonable request. And I think we should demonstrate our support to Mr. Chassett and thank him for his excellent work and his stewardship of our agency and other CCAs in the state of California.
Thank you, Member Arreguín. I want to recognize Board Member Haggerty.
Thank you. I think Mayor Arreguín has once again captured my thoughts. I would just like to say that I understand the times that we are in. However, we made a deal with Mr. Chassett via a contract, and we said that he would be available for a bonus. Part of the reason for that is he is not, although he should be, the highest paid CCA director in this Bay Area. So I think to go back against our word, and I realize the wording, that it doesn't say he automatically gets it, but it does say he will be considered for it, and his marks will, how he evaluates will dictate what he gets up to a maximum. I think anything less is really disingenuous.
Thank you, Director Haggerty. Is there any other board member who wishes to speak on this issue? Okay, I just want to second Mayor Arreguín's comments. Nick has done an outstanding job in this agency, would not be in the position that it's in if it were not for Nick. And a lot of the public speakers mentioned the crises, the multiple crises that we're facing with the PCIA, with COVID, with civil unrest because of racism. Nick has actually really taken the lead on many of these issues. I don't know if it's public facing knowledge, but he's really spearheaded the agency's response to COVID, and he personally spent time, nights and weekends, trying to figure out the best way to spend our dollars to aid our communities in their time of need. So I haven't heard a motion, so I'm going to take the opportunity to make a motion myself to go ahead and grant our CEO, Nick Chassett, a 3.5% bonus for his performance over the past fiscal year. And I am looking for a second.
I'll second that.
And I have a second from Member Penton and Pleasanton. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alameda County,
No.
Albany,
Abstain.
Berkeley,
Yes.
Dublin,
Yes.
Fremont,
Yes.
Hayward,
Yes.
Livermore,
Yes.
Newark, Pleasanton,
Yes.
San Leandro,
Yes.
Tracy. I'm sorry, Tracy.
Yes.
Thank you. Union City,
Yes.
Emeryville.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. And I just wanted to note for members of the public that highlight that Supervisor Haggerty mentioned that we had room up to 7% in Nick's contract, and the understanding is that he absolutely deserves a bonus, and that's reflected in the vote taken tonight. But we're trying to be mindful of the atmosphere that we're in, and we have many agencies that are instituting furloughs, that are laying off workers. So, we're trying to strike that balance and show our appreciation of our CEO in this time. So we'll move on to the next item. Were there any public, we already took public comment for this. I apologize. So we're on to item 13. This is the extension of temporary revision to terms and conditions, section failure to pay, and temporary suspension of delinquent accounts and collection policy. Nick, are you going to do this one?
Yeah, I'll do it. I think Annie was having some technical difficulties, so I'll cover it. This is an extension of actions that were taken in March to suspend two policies that we have. So one is a policy that relates to our sorry, I'm just trying to get my screen up here. One is a policy that relates to what we do when customers are delinquent in their payment, and the other relates to our collections policy. So when customers reach a certain delinquency in payments, our policies allow EBCE to return that customer to PG&E bundled service. And then similarly, if we have a customer that is delinquent, we have the ability to send that customer to collections to sort of recoup the funds that they owe us. In light of the current circumstances and really in line with the steps that the state of California has instituted for investor-owned utilities, we suspended these two policies in March for 90 days to assess. We suspended these policies for 90 days in March to sort of assess a variety of factors related to what is the level of change in customer non-payment, and just to sort of determine how things would progress. I think we find ourselves in a position where it makes sense for us to suspend these policies for another 90 days to give our customers some needed protections, and we can come back and see whether it makes sense to further suspend these policies again, likely in September.
Thank you, Nick. Are there any clarifying questions from the board? I see Scott, you have your hand raised. now it's down. Jesse?
I just want to thank the CEO for proposing this. We know the economic ramifications of COVID-19 will last beyond the shelter in place. We have many of our constituents that have lost their jobs or seen a significant reduction in income. And I really think this is critical to adjust recovery out of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm prepared to make a motion if that's appropriate.
That is totally fine.
I
Pardon
move
me, I do
adoption
have
of
one
the staff
speaker.
recommendation.
Pardon me, Director Argan, I do have one speaker.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we could, it's okay to
We
take.
can make a motion prior to public comment.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Apologies.
That's
I'll
okay.
second.
Okay, I have a motion from Member Arreguín, a second from Member Haggerty, and now we can, unless there are any clarifying questions from the board, we'll move into public comment.
I don't believe I was the second.
Oh, I apologize.
It was Jaime Petito.
Jaime, you sound just like Supervisor Haggerty. I apologize.
I'm not that esteemed yet.
Well, every day you spend on the job, you get closer to him. Okay. Stephanie, we can move on to public comment.
Thank you. I have Jessica Tovar signed up for this item. Okay. I also have Blair Beekman signed up for this item and Aleda Dupree. There's Jessica. Okay, Jessica, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Obviously, I am in support of this proposal for the very reasons that I mentioned earlier about majority of folks in our community are out of work or have, been impacted hugely financially because of this whole pandemic. So I am a believer in addressing both the good as well as what needs to be changed. And so I do want to just appreciate that you are extending the timeline for not making collections on delinquent accounts. That's all.
Thank you, Jessica. I believe next up is Aleda Dupree.
Thank you, Vice Chair Martinez and members. Aleda Dupree for the record. This is very, very important, and we're in unprecedented times. And what this policy shows is that we care about people and we are proud of our brand of being a community-supported public energy program. It's important that we do our outreach to help people in need. I mentioned before about disabled veterans, and there are some that I'm sure will find this program to be very helpful. Now, I do not speak about disabled veterans academically. I am one, service disabled. I fought in Operation Desert Storm. So this is something very near and dear to me, especially possibly during my times in Oakland. So I appreciate the leadership that you are taking in staying the course, in extending this program, because what we're showing by not turning people back over to PG&E is that we are owning our brand and we are owning ourselves as an agency of the people. And I thank you.
Thank you, Aleda. Blair Beekman is next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I do that as a check, so thank you for answering. Yeah, I would like to reiterate the words of the previous speakers, and thank you for your forgiveness efforts that you try to practice. Being from the San Jose area, we've had a bit more of a difficult time with forgiveness subjects, rental forgiveness subjects. And, but we're slowly catching up in San Jose. And I think we're doing that because of the really good examples that the mayor of Berkeley has started and has worked towards. And I imagine he's applied some of that to the community energy practices here. And it's really helpful. You're practicing a very loose system where we can all feel safe and trusting of, of good government practices, and that these issues around COVID, can really be addressed for the long term together, and we can do it practically, in practical terms, and not in terms of big business, and not in terms of debt, having to be forced into the debt situation. We're trying to really alleviate the debt questions, and that's vital. That's really just nice. So thank you. And to do that in a way, describes our better future and our better selves. And that's important. And it's those kind of lessons that I think we're trying to learn right now and respect and grow from. And from that's where we can develop our good practices for the future. And it's not pretty, but it's, it can bring out some interesting practices of ourselves and what we are capable of, and what exactly is business and what is exactly debt. And so I thank you for the incredible work that you're doing. You're just giving a really great example to the Bay Area about how to work on the issues of debt and debt forgiveness. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Stephanie, I don't see anyone else waiting. And are there any comments from the board? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, with that, we have a motion from Member Arreguín and a second from Member Patino. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alameda County,
Yes.
Albany,
Yes.
Berkeley,
Yes.
Dublin,
Yes.
Fremont,
Yes.
Hayward,
Yes.
Livermore,
Yes.
Newark, they are on the line, Pleasanton,
Yes.
San Leandro,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Union City,
Yes.
Emeryville.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. That takes us to informational item number 14, enrollment of new communities, Pleasanton, Newark, and Tracy. Do we have a staff report on this?
Yes, we do. Thank you. Can we go to the third page, which is attachment A? There we go. So this is a bit of an eye chart, but I thought it gives you some context. So since we've brought 3 new communities into our JPA and onto this board, the next major question we have to work through is, when do we start serving our 3 new communities? So we've been doing analysis considering a number of factors. The private, really, I would say there's 5 primary factors. So there's a question of notification and timeline of actual doing customer outreach. There's the interplay between bringing our new communities on and when the time of use default is going to occur. PG&E across its full territory is transitioning all residential customers on over a couple of years onto time of use rates. And so, moving customers to a new supplier, EBC, and then shifting them onto time of use rates could create some customer confusion. So we're trying to sort of ensure that we're not making 2 changes at once. There's procurement costs. So we want to make sure we're bringing our new communities on during a period when procurement costs are low. So, the financial impacts to the agency and to those customers is a positive thing. And there's also this customer experience, piece. So, especially in 2 of our 3 new communities, Pleasanton and Tracy, heavier air conditioning usage. So we want to make sure we're not starting to serve those customers in, say, a July or an August when they see really high bills just because they're using a lot more air conditioning. And customers say, hey, why is my bill so high? they look at their bill, something changed, and they attribute that increase in their bill to EBCE. So we've been really looking at all of these factors and trying to think about what is the optimal timeline. And I think and this is where we get to sort of this attachment. From a staff standpoint, right now, we feel like the optimal timeline to optimize customer experience, procurement costs, and agency finances is starting to roll out to both residential and commercial customers at the beginning of April 2021. The rationale from a cost perspective is spring energy costs tend to be low. So while rates start to rise, customer rates start to rise from winter to summer rates. And so you're starting to see just rates are naturally going up. So the spread between costs and revenues is more positive during that period of time. We're also in April missing for the TOU transition largely for at least Alameda County. So that is happening a month later, but if we transition in April, so there's not transitioning two things at once. So that's generally sort of where sort of staff is currently thinking. Things would make sense. I think we wanted to present this as an informational item to get feedback. Once we sort of settled though on a date, I think our goal would be to settle on a date in July. The really important work begins, which is actually having a dialogue with the three communities about our marketing strategy and our outreach strategy and all the work we need to do to communicate to residential customers, to businesses about what's coming. And so the picking of this date also, we wanted to make sure we have adequate time to have that dialogue with three cities to make sure we have a really strong plan in place to bring those communities on.
Thank you, Nick. And I want to recognize that our chair, Dan Kalb, has rejoined. Dan, are you ready to take the gavel back?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Diane. Sorry, folks, I had something unavoidable to deal with. Appreciate your chairpersonship, Councilmember Martinez. So you said we're on item 14, is that correct?
Correct. The presentation has just completed, so we haven't gone back for clarifying questions on this yet.
Okay, and thank you. And Madam Clerk, do we have any public speakers on this item?
We have one speaker for this item.
Okay, why don't we invite the speaker to come forward or to speak, and then we'll go to board member questions.
Blair Beekman. Blair, did you still intend to speak to this item? Okay, I'm not seeing them in the attendee list, so they must have dropped off again.
Okay. Okay, and right. Okay, well, if they show back up and while we're talking, we could put them back in. So to council member, to board member questions, if anybody could just raise your hand. Do we have the hand raise feature here? I thought we had the hand raise feature. Oh, well, somehow let me know if you want to talk, and we'll allow everybody to talk. Okay, I see Jerry.
Just, I don't have any clarifying questions. I appreciate the information item, and Pleasanton's looking forward and to coming on board. But I do look forward to the marketing strategy and working with your team, Nick, as to what that's going to look like and when we start that, as I can see by your timeline. So, and I'm sure Tracy and Newark feel the same way.
Okay, I see Mike Hannon from Newark. Mike.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Nick and his team. We've already reached out to the organization to have them come and speak to our community regarding marketing strategy and things of that nature, so that our residents are well prepared to join enthusiastically this organization. So thank you, Nick, to your team for agreeing to meet with our community. We appreciate it.
Okay, anybody else? That's Pleasanton. Tracy, Mr. Ariola.
Thank you. Just wanted to say on behalf of our city that, very much thank you for allowing you to expand into San Joaquin County. We're very excited to be joining you. We look forward to working with you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. And I see there's no other, and this is not an action item. This is just an informational item. So I think this has already been said before I came back in, but we're thrilled to have these three cities as part of EBCE. And at some point down the road, we may even explore even more cities. So, but thank you for being part of this great agency. Nick, is there anything else on this?
Nope.
No. Okay.
We will bring this back in July as an action item, and then we will start working on the plan.
Great. Excellent. Okay. So let's go to item 15, our resilience program, and this is an action item. Who's presenting on this?
JP?
JP, all right.
Hi there, JP Ross, Senior Director of Local Development and Electrification here at EBCE. So I'll be talking about an action item tonight, which is the agreement to sign 2 contracts and request for the board to authorize the CEO to negotiate and sign contracts. So we'll be going through that. If you go to the next slide, please. And one more. So as you are all unfortunately aware, in addition to COVID, we have been facing the public safety power shutoffs, and we'll continue to face them. So last year, over 50,000 of our accounts lost power at least once. And we're expecting these public safety power shutoffs to continue for a while. So we have 3 concurrent programs that we are working on to deliver some solutions to this situation. One is our critical facilities program through the Bay Area Air Quality Management District grant. We're also working on the medical baseline resilience program that the board authorized back in November. And there has been some slowdown on that because of COVID and the fact that some of the medical providers and organizations that we were working with became very overwhelmed with COVID. And so we had to put some of that on hold, though we have been continuing to work on that program for kind of a comprehensive plan for our medical baseline customers in the interim. So that has been progressing. And then the third bullet point here is our resilience program for residential and commercial customers. So that's what we'll be talking about today. And really the goal there is to deliver resilience in the form of solar and battery and standalone batteries to our commercial and residential customers. And the outcome of this will be battery backup systems for over 1,000 customers in our territory. And in addition to providing that resilience to our customers, we will also be reducing our peak load. And by reducing our peak load through this load modification contract that we have developed, we will be reducing our resource adequacy obligations. So there's also a benefit to this program that can be delivered out across our customer base in the form of lower procurement costs. Next slide, please. So the outline of the program in summary is that we will be partnering with 2 vendors, Sunrun for residential and commercial customers. I'm sorry, residential single family and multifamily customers, and NLX for commercial customers. To deploy these solar and storage systems on our homes and businesses throughout the territory. All systems are required to be able to island from the grid, and that means to separate from the grid when the power goes out. Most solar systems and standalone solar systems, when the grid goes out, the solar system cannot actually provide electricity to the home. So this is something that was specified in our solicitation and is really required to deliver resilience. And notably, we are working with these vendors to make sure that customers who have existing solar systems can participate in this program. So we have some retrofit options where batteries can be retrofitted to existing solar systems. We already have over 30,000 NEM customers, net energy metering customers, who already have solar. So we want to make sure that that they can participate as well by retrofitting their systems. So there's an offer that will be coming out later on this year for retrofits. And that battery capacity from those batteries will be aggregated up and sold to EBCE for load modification. And the payments that we'll be making for that load modification then gets shared with the customers so that the participating customers, oops, sorry, back. Moving on. Okay, I'll just keep talking. So the battery capacity that we will be paying for load modification will end up being, the compensation for that will be shared with customers. And by doing that, it reduces the cost of participation, the cost of ownership for those customers. And the goal there is to increase participation in the program. We are working with these vendors to deliver, to develop marketing strategies. Let's see, I think we're 2 slides up from here, or maybe 1 actually. No, there you go. There you go. So we're working with, with these vendors on marketing plans so that we will be reaching out to our customers using our customer data and any information we have to kind of segment and target messaging to customers. We have specific messaging for customers who, for example, have experienced power outages, or who are medical baseline customers, or who are eligible for additional incentives from the state of California. So we're really working to customize messaging so that it can land well and resonate with the customers who we're reaching out to. And we are also focusing on our disadvantaged communities. So within the solicitation and in the agreements, a minimum of 20% of these systems will be installed in our low income and disadvantaged communities, or our CareFera medical baseline customers, to make sure that that the systems here are spread throughout our community. And we have a lot of focus on our multifamily housing. That's one channel that we will be actually coming back to you on, as most of our cities have good connections, or some play a role with multifamily and multifamily affordable housing operators. So that is a key component of this program, building off of the OCEI contract that we have with Sunrun. So not just eligible for homeowners, but also renters as well, who will be getting benefit from this program as well. We also have specified workforce development requirements, requiring local hire as well as prevailing wage, similar to the Oakland Clean Energy Initiative agreement that we had signed with Sunrun previously. And as one of the most, the earliest and kind of biggest calls to action, we're certainly using this program to raise awareness with our customers about the services that we're providing, and how working together as a community, we can deliver community benefit in the form of resilience and economic development. Next slide, please. So quick review on the solicitation. We issued it back in November November 19th of 2019. Sorry for the typo here. And we did it with 3 other LSEs: Peninsula Clean Energy, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and Silicon Valley Power. And our part of this solicitation was to deliver at least 10 megawatts of resource adequacy. And originally, when we issued the solicitation, resource adequacy was the commodity that we were trying to buy, and that's since changed, and I'll talk about how we have changed the commodity that we're going to buy. We received 19 bids and interviewed 8 of our vendors, and measured and scored our vendors based on the elements here on the chart on the right. So there were some threshold issues around capability and system requirements and timeline, as well as certainly pricing and experience were highly weighted, as well as other elements like safety and workforce development and local hiring. So the public process, I think, worked pretty well, and ends up that there's pretty consistent results from the 3 other LSEs of who the vendors were. So the ability to kind of offer a regional program with some consistency is something that we're working on with the vendors. Next slide, please. So we have selected 2 finalists that we are requesting the board's approval to give Nick the authority to negotiate and sign contracts with Sunrun and NLX. So for a total between the 2 vendors, we are pursuing 10.75 megawatts of load modification. That'll be 5 megawatts with NLX and 5.75 megawatts with Sunrun as the targets to deploy over the next couple of years. And it's important to note that that's the target deployment of storage. The actual capacity delivered of both solar and storage will be about 2 to 3 times that amount, because the contract for load modification is really the capacity and energy that the vendors can deliver us on a daily basis. And it's important to note that the solar and storage necessary to provide that load modification are actually larger than the capacity of that load modification itself. We had worked very hard to actually bring the Sunrun contract, well, both contracts, but we have the Sunrun contract ready for the board's approval. And that's why there's actually a mess up on this slide here. I think there was an issue with which version we provided, but we were ready to bring the Sunrun contract to you for approval. But the recent decision out of the Public Utilities Commission to limit EBCE's purchasing authority on local RA actually kind of brings the value of this into question a little bit. We need to understand what the change to that value is before we actually feel comfortable signing this contract. So we've changed the request to the board to request authority to negotiate and sign instead of requesting your approval. The contract is attached in this staff report, so you can see it. But we still need a little bit of time to make sure that everything lines up for this contract. We are really moving towards launching this program as soon as possible in time for the summer. And our plan is to launch it in early July if everything goes according to plan. We are developing a landing page for customers to express their interest in the program, and have developed some automated processes to deliver customers through SMUD and through a validation process with SMUD, passing through our data management system and working with Taj to add some other key attributes to help assist the sales process, and then pass that on to our vendors. So we're excited by what we have built here and really excited by the opportunity to launch this program. Next slide, please. So I want to talk briefly about load modification. So as explained earlier, the original contract went out for resource adequacy as one of the commodities that we need to purchase. But the opportunity and complexity of behind the meter solar and storage resources providing resource adequacy is high, and the cost to comply with the California ISO program called Proxy Demand Response are fairly high. And so over the last 6 months, we've worked to develop essentially an alternative approach to getting the same outcome, which is a reduction in our obligation to buy resource adequacy. And so we're going to do that through load modification. So every day, these batteries will be dispatched on a regular cycle during the peak hours of EBCE's load. And so the graph here shows an example of what a peak month might look like. So the x-axis is the hours of the day, the y-axis is the peak load, and the orange line is what our original gross load would be. And then here's an example of some amount of load modification, about 10 megawatts of load modification, that reduces our peak load by that amount, about 10 megawatts over 4 hours. And so we will let the CEC, the California Energy Commission, know that we will be dispatching these batteries on this regular cycle. And then they will reduce our peak demand, and then we'll have to buy less resource adequacy. And we have the flexibility to change that over the term of the contract. So it'll be a 10-year contract with the vendors. And we know that our load will change over time. And so on an annual basis, we have the flexibility to move that window. We might narrow it, we might widen it, we might shift it later or earlier, depending on how our peak load is changing. And another benefit of this is that this load reduction happens every day. So typical resource adequacy capacity is online and responds to an event, which means that our procurement obligation is only reduced when an event is called. And in this case, we are kind of paying for and getting this load reduction on a daily basis and during the time period when we pay the most for energy. So it's a pretty innovative product that we've been happy to work with the California Energy Commission to develop a process for and had support from our vendors. And so we're able to develop a new contract that our other CCA counterparties are also looking to sign with their counterparties, as we are trying to kind of pave a way for behind the meter resources to play a more and to facilitate their playing in this market in a way that benefits not only the participating customers with resilience, but all customers in the form of lower energy costs. So let's see, that's an explanation of load mod. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the request here for the board is that we ask for you to approve the selection of these two vendors, Sunrun and NLX, in response to our solicitation, and that you would authorize the CEO to negotiate and execute these load modifying agreements with Sunrun and with NLX so that we can get these programs up and running in a timely manner and start delivering resilience and value back to our customers in time for the next couple of fire seasons. And that's all I have today, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, JP. Appreciate all the work that has gone into this. This is exciting. This is a pretty good size project here. This is not some little thing. Madam Clerk, do we have any public speakers on this item?
Yes, we have 8 speakers for this item.
Okay,
Al Weinrub.
Great.
Aleda Dupree, Blair Beekman, Colin Miller. Let's see if they start raising their hands. I have Jessica Tovar, Crystal Hoying, Audrey Ichinose, Seda Dumas-Drogan, and Terry Tamplin.
Okay, Al, I think you're all set.
Oh, okay. Didn't know which button to press. Thank you. This is Al Weinrub. I'm a coordinator of the Local Clean Energy Alliance, and I haven't had the opportunity to really talk to the board much. Thank you, Stephanie and Dan and the rest of the members of the board. I wanted to just say a few words about this program. It's got a lot of very innovative pieces that are very, very positive. You know, when this program was announced back in November 2019, it was in the wake of utility power shutoffs that year. And it was touted largely, you know, as advancing community resilience in the face of such shutoffs, and to do that largely through installation of behind the meter battery storage. And I just want to remind folks that the impacts of the power shutoffs fell very predominantly on medically vulnerable, aged folks, on low-income workers who couldn't go out to work because power was shut off, and struggling small businesses. Those are the populations that were really most impacted by the power shutoff. It seems that the emphasis of this program has shifted now, with much greater emphasis on the resource adequacy benefits through better management of load requirements. And it's really positive that these two benefits are explicitly combined, and exactly why the CPUC's recent decision that was just mentioned on central procurement of resource adequacy really inhibits community choice programs from creating programs like this that could really benefit our community. However, I would like to point out that it really appears that the community resilience aspect of this program is heavily compromised by the resilience benefit not going to the communities I mentioned that are most in need of power during shutoffs. The target of any community resilience program should be that it is explicitly targeted to those in most need. The East Bay Community Energy Programs call for a minimum of 20% of systems installed in disadvantaged communities, low-income communities, and care, fair, and medical baseline customer properties. Really appears to be more like a form of discrimination against those communities. What it means is that 80% of customers not at risk are the ones who are getting benefits for which they don't have a pressing need. This is really a form of the kind of white privilege that we've seen so much talk about recently in our streets and everywhere else. In other words, there's really no equity in this program with that 20% figure. It's sort of an insult to disadvantaged and vulnerable communities to be thrown a 20% bone and act as if it addresses a pattern of racial discrimination and difficulty. You know, the program continues the kind of, you know, invisibility that disadvantaged communities are having, that's being cultivated by, you know, racism, and you know, we need to address the institutionalized racism explicitly, you know, as East Bay Community Energy. If anything, the program, without a firm commitment to 100% focus on these communities, really comes across as another form of discrimination with the effect of worsening the inequities in our community. So I would really like to urge that 20% minimum be replaced by a much more affirmative and positive commitment to what
Thank you, Al.
the focus on these communities 100%.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Colin Miller, your microphone is unmuted.
Good evening, EBC board members. My name is Colin Miller, and I'm speaking as coordinator of the Oakland Climate Action Coalition, community-based coalition with over 36 member organizations. I want to thank you as board and also thank EBCE staff for your work in advancing energy resilience in our communities in response to utility shutoffs and in preparation for the fire season. However, these contracts in response to the distributed resource adequacy requirement to meet power safety shutoff needs for resilience purposes should not be another opportunity for corporations like Sunrun and NLX, who do not have the business model set up for community ownership to profit, to share profits with our communities. I urge you to reject these two contracts to these companies based in San Francisco and Rome, Italy. We are calling on you to go back to staff to find local contractors who can work with models that lead to community ownership and profit sharing with our most impacted communities, low-income communities of color. It is your duty to actively work on efforts to fight against systemic racism. EBCE needs to commit to increasing local hire and workforce development criteria for vendors to 100% local hire and workforce development. 10% is insufficient to meaningfully benefit disadvantaged communities. Finally, 100% of these resilience funds for solar and storage must go to disadvantaged communities, to low-income communities of color. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you. Crystal, your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you. Good evening, Board, Madam Clerk. My name is Crystal Huang from People Power Solar Cooperative. And despite being less than a 2-year-old enterprise, we have close to 100 member owners who live, work, play, and pray throughout EBC territory. And we are honored to receive the Community Innovation Grant to build the second community-owned solar project in the EBC territory to provide a critical model for community investment and ownership for renewable energy in California that lacks shared solar laws. And we really applaud EBC's effort in creating the innovative alternative approach to meet our RA obligations by combining solar and storage. And we hope the process of building these projects can be more collaborative in the near future than it has been, to allow community ownership and stewardship the way the community needs. Friday is Juneteenth. Juneteenth is a day that honors Black freedom and centers Black people's unique contribution to the struggle for justice in the United States. It is our duty today to make sure we actively work on efforts to fight against systemic racism. The movement for Black Lives demand for community control to do just that. As Hop Hopkins of Sierra Club said very well, when the kid in East Oakland gets asthma from car pollution because her neighborhood is surrounded by freeways, that is white supremacy. And we will say that when a family in East Oakland has to suffer power shutoffs because they are deemed so-called hard to reach communities by the way we build project in this agency, that is white supremacy. And we will say that allowing outside people to develop and make profit without allowing any community ownership, even if it is to build clean energy project, that it's also white supremacy. We're very disappointed to see this contract given to Sunrun and NLX. While you might not think you are racist, it is your duty to actively work on the effort to fight against systemic racism in the way that we have been building energy projects. And we hope the staff can actively explore ways to work with models that leads to community ownership and profit sharing in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Jada Dumas.
Hi, this is Jada Durmaz Logan with Local Clean Energy Alliance. I'm an Oakland resident. I urge the board to increase the percentage of system capacity that will be installed in disadvantaged communities. If this program's purpose is to deliver resilience to the community, you should prioritize the resilience of the communities that are the most vulnerable to power shutoffs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Audrey Chinese, your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you. This is Audrey Chinose again, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. This unquestionably is an exciting program in its outline and its intent, and but there is, of course, the criticism that all the previous speakers have advanced. And I would like to suggest another alternative to increasing participation among low-income customers and those in disadvantaged areas. Apart from raising the 20% siting target to a much higher and raising the percentages stipulated for jobs and minority employment. To combat the systemic bias in our society that favors prior ownership and wealth. In many ways, despite our best intentions, EBCE should also consider the outright subsidies or donations of PV plus battery systems. To pay for this activity is one reason why EBCE's local development funding needs to be supplemented in this and future years. And we'll talk about that in another, under another item. So in considering a way to donate these solar plus storage systems, maybe a target, the selection of the recipients is very difficult, but maybe one possible way to raise this participation would be to donate such systems to poor Black churches in impacted areas. This is just an example, particularly to those that run programs for the homeless and the poor. EBCE could start, for example, with Westside Baptist Church near West Oakland's BART station. Westside works with many other partners on food and meal distributions and on a safe parking program that includes weekly showers for homeless people who have cars. Incidentally, the Westside's pastor, the Reverend Ken Chambers, was an original member of EBCE's Community Advisory Committee. Helping this church in its work in its community, while also promoting EBCE's local resource adequacy, would seem to be a great fit to further our agency's many goals. And social equity, of course, in this time should really be a high priority. I'm sure other examples of appropriate beneficiaries could be found.
At this time.
And thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you. Second call for Terry Tamplin before I unmute. And just to remind speakers that there is a 3-minute limit and we will be cutting the microphones off at 3 minutes. Jessica Tovar, your microphone is clear.
Jessica Tovar on behalf of East Bay Clean Power Alliance. We are calling for you to raise the percentage focused on disadvantaged communities. And I want to echo what has been said already, but also add that for many of these communities, energy, specifically electricity, is a life and death situation. And we should be investing to make sure that our most vulnerable communities, specifically medical baseline, have the resilience that they need to keep their power on, to charge whatever life support systems that they have in their homes. And then the other thing I want to add is that we do need to emphasize a lot more local jobs and emphasize contracting, local contracts with potential vendors, because when you actually contract outside of the community, you're sending our very money from our community out of our community. And essentially, I see that as it being taken from us, knowing very well that the intention of local clean energy development, such projects like this are intended to give jobs to our community, intended to give resilience programs to our community. So I want to echo what was already said and just really emphasize that a project that is designed for resiliency during planned power shutoffs and other crises is what we need here at home. And to do that for people who don't actually need it or for a privileged community is really an insult to injury. We need to do this now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Is there any more speakers, Madam Clerk?
Yes, I have Alita Dupree and
Great.
Blair Beekman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson Kalb and members. Alita Dupree, for the record, she and her.
This is very, very important work, and I'm just going to talk with you about the basics of electricity. I reiterate to you that I am simply an ordinary member of the public and user of electricity, and this issue of the public safety power shutoffs was very, very personal to me, in which when that happened in October of last year, it forced me to change my plans, and I went back to my winter place. And I was very concerned about that the loss of power could affect Amtrak signals. And if you don't have signals, it's really, really hard to run a railroad. The idea of resiliency in electricity is not new. Consider the North Shore Towers Apartments in the borough of Queens in New York City, which has an approximately 9 megawatt microgrid that I remember the blackout of 1977 in New York City. The entire city went dark, but North Shore Towers stayed on. So this is the start of what I would hopefully be many more megawatts of storage that will help us to keep our community running. And it is just a start. Do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We have to start somewhere. And this is an opportunity for us to purchase inexpensive electricity when demand is low, and to fill up our batteries. And then we can dispense this to lower our demand in the times of high consumption. I practice this time of use myself. And so really, resiliency is about the people in the large macro perspective, because I think about the blackout in New York City, and it was not just about homes and office buildings going dark, and but it caused the subway, the legendary and historic New York City subway, to shut down. A defining institution of New York stopped in its tracks by a power outage. So we can take leadership with this project and show that we can keep our community as a whole operating. And especially we have a little train system called BART, which we want to help to keep running. So I encourage you to begin this work by signing this contract, and let's not make this the last of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next speaker, please.
Blair Beekman, your microphone is unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for the check. This item was at the CAC meeting on Monday, and thank you that you presented this to the public and that you'll be working on it. Much of the same things said here today were said on Monday by the public. You know, and I guess my feeling of this issue is that it seems like such a good program that, you know, to really put in your best idealism and your best creative efforts, you know, or best, you know, ideas what this sort of project can be, you know, that's what everyone's asking for, and how it could be accessible to low-income people in their neighborhoods it seems really an important issue, and that's what I'm learning from this item. And so thank you and good luck in these efforts. And just to ask, you know, I'm understanding that what part of it's good is that it has a way to store, you know, solar energy, and that's a great thing, like as there is a power outage and such. Is there going to be a way in the future, you know, just to be sure that there isn't going to be a way that there's going to be some sort of smart meter connection to all of this? And I hope there isn't. And if there is, I just want to offer my caution about using such techniques. And that brings back the idea of, you know, we have to really bring out our best stuff with this sort of projects. And smart meters are not our best efforts in life. And so I just wanted to note that at this time. Oh, Alameda Safe Energy, they're working on issues like that of smart meters, and in the city of Alameda. I just wanted to mention them as they do really, you know, important work and I just wanted to thank him at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that the?
Thank you. I have no other speakers for this item.
Okay, so colleagues, now for those who want to talk, is there a raise hand feature? I see Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you, Chair Kalb. I don't have a raise hand feature because I'm one of the co-hosts, so I'll just be doing this if I need to speak. I just wanted to recognize the comments made tonight about equity, especially as it pertains to institutionalized racism. However, I wish these concerns had been raised at the beginning of the RFP process. That said, I think this is an opportunity to invest in local development that we can't pass up. I think that staff has done a phenomenal job with the direction that was given by the board, and I look forward to supporting these contracts tonight.
Thank you very much. Am I seeing anybody else raise their hand? Jane, yes, Community Advisory Committee, how are you?
Thanks. I just wanted to mention that during the meeting on Monday, we did discuss this item, and I think there was broad support for this item from the CAC and a lot of excitement around this. But there was concern raised over the limited weighting of local hire in the contract review, as well as the low relative to demographic representation target of 20% for project implementation in low-income and disadvantaged communities. The CAC unanimously approved a motion urging municipalities to take all available actions to increase the participation of low-income communities, ensuring that at a minimum the 20% is reached, if not exceeded. And some specific measures that were suggested include proactive municipal cooperation with Sunrun and NLX to inform and encourage low-income and multifamily apartment participation in the program, expedited permitting and planning review, standardization of code and checklists, waiving of permit fees, waiving of inspection fees, and property assessment tax reductions. I'm sure there are other measures that can be explored as well. In addition to that, I would just add that it would be useful perhaps to look at that 20% and how that was established and why that was established as a useful number at this time, and what barriers are in place right now and in the future to increasing that percentage to something that's more representative. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Hernandez from Dublin. We need to unmute Councilmember Hernandez. How's that working here? Ask to unmute.
That was strange. It unmuted it all by itself.
There you go.
No, I just wanted to say thank you to staff for doing such a tremendous job, but also for us not to let us forget that this is truly one of the most innovative energy projects in the entire country. So kudos to everyone that was involved.
Okay. Am I seeing anybody else? I don't see a hand raised. I don't see a hand waving. Let me see here. Do we have, unless there's any other comments, I'm happy it's an action item. I'm happy to entertain a motion.
I'll move the item.
Okay, that's Mayor Pilch from Albany.
Second.
And a second from Councilmember Martinez from Emeryville. Madam Chair, could you do a roll call? I see no more hands in the air, so I will do a roll call vote. Madam Clerk.
Alameda County?
Yes.
Albany?
Yes.
Berkeley?
Yes.
Dublin?
Yes.
Emeryville?
Yes.
Fremont? Fremont?
Yes.
Thank you. Hayward?
Yes.
Livermore?
Yes.
Newark?
Before I cast my vote, I'd like to make one clarification. For some reason, I was not listed as a panelist, though I was listening to the discussion on prior items and did vote yes on previous items. So I would like to reflect that Newark's vote, both on the minutes and the CEO compensation or performance evaluation were both yes. On this item, I vote yes as well.
Thank you. Pleasanton,
Yes.
San Leandro,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Union City,
Yes.
Oakland.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you. And to the staff, once this rolls out, I assume that we are going to evaluate it, at some point and see how to expand it, what are modifications, what can be modified to address some of the comments today. This is not a static project, is that right? To JP and Nick?
Yes, it's certainly not a static project. We're setting targets for ourselves. We always seek to exceed those targets. I think we're going to try to gain as much lessons learned too from this project and see how we can sort of scale it to even more communities over time. Our intention is that this is not the end, but this is the beginning, and we're talking tens and tens of thousands of solar and storage systems deployed across Alameda County. The one thing I will just remark is that there is a real emphasis. 50,000 of our customers experienced a power shutoff last fall, and there is a real emphasis in this program on supporting those 50,000 customers who, 25,000 or so of whom experienced 2 shutoffs. And that is, a deep design component of this program.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to the next item. And let's see here. Who is staff? Who's presenting on this item?
Marie Fontenot.
Hi, thanks very much. Just want to check in and make sure that you can hear me as well. Yep, I see heads nodding. Thank you. All right. Stephanie, would you please go to the next slide? I'm here to present to the board just an informational item. As a reminder, I last presented to the board early in 2020 and talked about the integrated resource planning process that is underway. This process is a long-term resource planning process that is done through the Public Utilities Commission and that we have to complete every 2 years. We've broken up our analysis into 2 phases. In the first phase of our analysis, we're doing a study that is designed to meet our CPUC compliance filing obligation that is due on September 1st. In the second phase of the analysis, we're doing additional analysis with the hopes of setting more aggressive goals for EBCE around greenhouse gas emissions reduction. Stephanie, next slide, please. Thank you. Since I've last presented to the board, the CPUC has made a number of changes to the filing requirements, the most noteworthy of which is that whereas originally we only had to file, there was only one required scenario that we had to file, we now have 2 scenarios that we have to file with the Commission on September 1st. And those are to see what our portfolios would look like if we were working up to statewide emissions of 46 million metric tons of greenhouse gases, or the second is 38 million metric tons of greenhouse gases. And in this yellow row, I'm showing what EBCE's allocated share of those statewide emissions would be. Let's go to the next slide, please. For a little context and comparison, in 2020, this year, EBCE anticipates that our total demand will be about 5,900 gigawatt hours. Our Bright Choice customer demand is about 4,900 gigawatt hours. And we expect the emissions associated with, really it's just with Bright Choice because the other 2 product groups have 0 emissions. We expect our total emissions to be just under 1 million metric tons, about 970,000 metric tons. if we use the same procurement tools that we're using today, in 2030, at the same level of demand, our emissions would be about 540,000 metric tons. Unfortunately, due to a variety of regulatory changes and because of EBCE policy about wanting to build resources, have our own resources in Alameda County, we can't actually use the same procurement tools today going into the future. So this estimate of, hey, if we did everything in the future the way we're doing it today, we would be around 540,000 metric tons of emissions. That's not a realistic possibility for our organization. It's really just here for demonstration purposes. And then, of course, I also want to highlight that by 2030, our load will have increased in part because of the 3 additional jurisdictions that are joining us and because of normal load forecast changes over time. Let's go to the next slide, please. The way that what I'm focusing on right now are those first 2 scenarios that are being developed to meet our compliance obligation. In July, next month, I will come back to the board and I will be presenting to you the analysis that we have completed or that we will have completed at that time, and requesting your approval of the analysis so that we can meet our CPUC compliance filing obligation that is due on September 1st. I will later come back to the board and present the 3rd scenario, which will have more aggressive GHG reductions goals. And I will at that time ask the board to approve a different EBCE organizational target for greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So our approach to developing scenarios for our CPUC compliance filing is to build 2 different portfolios based on the CPUC's views of reliability and the CPUC's assumptions around what resources are actually going to be available in the market now and in the future. It's effectively a top-down approach. The CPUC is establishing what it thinks will be available and what it thinks will be reliable, and then we're trying to back out of that what resources we can use to have a portfolio that meets the greenhouse gas emissions targets that are assigned to us. When we do the additional analysis for ourselves, we're going to do a bottoms-up analysis where we're starting with a greenhouse gas emissions goal, and then we're building a portfolio based on EBCE organizational preferences. I'm highlighting this difference between top-down and bottoms-up because the final results that I will share with you sometime after September, it won't be a true apples to apples comparison. So it's a slight shortcoming, but I want to be transparent about the difference in perspectives here. Next slide, please. This slide shows you the types of resources that are going into our 2 CPUC compliant portfolios. This is not the entire universe of resources that are available to us. In the interest of space, I left out things like coal and nuclear because we know that we're not going to have those in our portfolio. Excuse me. I also left out some of the specific areas where wind and solar resources are designated as likely to be sited according to the CPUC. But this is a general breakdown of the types of resources. And I'll just note that when staff was thinking about what percentages or what volumes of different resource types we should incorporate in our portfolio, we looked at what our pro rata share of each resource type would be. And then we used our knowledge of the market to either increase or decrease from that pro rata share. In some cases we increased, like we think we'll have more energy storage than just our pro rata share of the market. And in other areas we decreased. With hydro, for example, as much as we value hydro, we know that there are not enough hydro resources coming up for recontracting, that it's likely that we would be able to actually get our full share of, or our full pro rata share of what the CPUC views as eligible and available to the market. Another area that we are taking less than our pro rata share are with biomass resources. We think it's unlikely that we'll have a high volume of biomass resources in our portfolio because we have a preference for resources sited in Alameda County, and biomass is typically sited in wooded communities. If we can go to the next slide, please. This is another way of viewing the same information, and this shows really the ratio of different resources within each portfolio. In the 46 million metric ton portfolio, that I wish I had included this on the slide, but I forgot. In the 46 million metric ton portfolio, we would have about just under 2,300 megawatts of capacity associated with this portfolio. In the 38 million metric ton, we would have just under 2,600 megawatts of capacity contracted to us. And so you see that there's maybe more solar in one, or solar is a smaller portion of the other portfolio, but it's really our way of measuring the types of resources and looking at the types of resources that we can have to get to a portfolio that is diverse and meets our energy needs. When I come back to you next month, I'll actually provide more information about what is driving the percentage composition of each of these resource types. And I also just want to make the point that for a little comparison, at this time, EBCE has 770 megawatts of resources under contract. So when we're looking ahead to 2030, and increasing what is today 770 megawatts, we're talking about taking it up, 3.5 times in terms of the total number of resources that we'll have under contract. Next slide, please. Now we're getting into some slides where I'm showing you the type of information that I will present to you in July to facilitate your review of our CPUC compliance filing analysis. One of the key areas that we'll be looking at are the costs associated with each of the portfolios. What the numbers on these slides are not even indicative. This really is designed to just show you the type of information that I will be presenting. So we'll provide an estimate of each portfolio's costs on an annual basis. We'll also show you the cost associated with serving our load and the revenues and net revenues associated with each portfolio type. And when I say with each portfolio type, I mean, what are the costs and the positive revenues associated with having long-term contracts in our portfolio. Next slide. Another area that we will be discussing with you is the reliability of each portfolio. Having a portfolio that is that's low in greenhouse gas emissions is desirable. Having a portfolio that is affordable is very desirable, but we also want a portfolio that is reliable and is not likely to contribute to dangerous conditions on the electric grid or power outages. And so a couple of the ways we'll be looking at that, actually one way that we'll be looking at it is reflected here, and that's every year, in how many hours of generation would we have to actually be leaning on the energy market to provide generation to us rather than using our own generating resources and delivering that energy into the market. If we're leaning on the market too much, it can be assumed that our portfolio is not as reliable or is not contributing to the overall reliability of the electric system. Next slide, please. In this and the last slide, I don't even have any initial results to show you yet, but I wanted to explain that when I come back in July, I will also explain to you the tenors associated with each of the different portfolios. The tenor is referring to the transaction length. So some transactions in our portfolio will be long-term transactions, some will be short-term, and some will be spot market or transactions with the CAISO day-to-day market. The reason that it's important that we think about how many long-term contracts, short-term contracts versus spot market transactions we have is that, as we all know, EBCE is a young organization. We do not have a credit rating yet. And as such, we want to make sure that we're making financially prudent decisions. We don't want to overextend ourselves. We don't want to execute too many long-term contracts and put ourselves at the risk that if customers were to leave us, we would have more contracts than our ability to pay for those contracts if customers leave. We also want to make sure that we don't sign a bunch of long-term contracts now and then maybe have prices go down in the future and not be able to take advantage of those. Conversely, we don't always want to be waiting till the last minute and thinking that prices are going to go down, because when you get into the shorter term or the spot market, you're a price taker. And so if prices are low, that's great. But if prices are high, that's not so great for you. So part of the analysis that we're doing is looking at what's the breakdown of the length of our transactions in each portfolio, and then do we think that this represents a prudent approach to risk management. Next slide, please. Finally, the last way that we'll be looking at the reliability of our different portfolios is to evaluate the weather volatility of power prices and the intermittency of renewable generation. We want to consider if we're taking on unreliable generation or price exposure from too much of a single type of renewable energy, or if the portfolio as a whole is able to balance risk among the different resource types. And so this is additional information that I will be bringing to you next month. And then again, after the August recess, when we set our internal goals for greenhouse gas emissions reduction. That is everything I wanted to go through with you today. I know I went through that very quickly, but I hope you had a chance to digest a little bit of it, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Appreciate all the work that went into that. And let's see, do we have any public speakers, Madam Clerk?
Yes, I have 3 speakers: Alita Dupree, Tom Kelly, and Terry Tamplin.
Thank you, Chair Kalb, Alita Dupree, she and her. Good presentation, and I've seen some of this in committee meetings. I appreciate and thank you for the fact that we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. Solar is predictable but intermittent, and wind has a lot of intermittency to it. It is good that we are using a mix of geographic sources for our resource plan. I noticed some mention of New Mexico and of the Southern California desert and Southern Nevada. And in Nevada, they are very, very good at farming the sun and making solar energy and shipping it. So that's a good partner to have with our surrounding states in accessing these resources. And hedging is complex, and the spot market. And so it's important to have a mix. And I know that the storage can help to play a part. Because if we can seize the day on that very cheap electricity during the day and store it for later use, we won't be so prone to have to purchase spot electricity in the afternoons when sometimes the spot price is several $100s per megawatt hour. So hedging is essential with a basket of our own generation and also that which is sourced from others. I believe that in Nevada, the power company is called NV Energy, used to be known as Nevada Power Company. and they generate about 70% of their electricity, and about the other 30 is sourced from other places. So we have to have that mix in there. Weather forecasting is essential. So let's lean on our meteorological expertise, so that with the prediction of the weather patterns, and especially occasional solar eclipses, we can capture the opportunities. So thank you for this. I'm looking forward to us taking action with it and submitting it to the PUC, and then we can get to work at building this out. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have Tom Kelly and Terry Tamplin. I'm not seeing them on the list. They may have dropped. If you are on a phone line, please press *9 to raise your hand for Tom Kelly and Terry Taplin. I apologize, that's #9. Okay, they have not responded.
Okay, so I think we're, okay, colleagues, any questions among board members? Let's see here, who is, I see no hands raised. Anybody have any questions? I see no questions. Okay, so that's an informational item, is that right? Yes, I believe that's correct. So we're gonna go on to, it's already 8:35. I know it's kind of late, but we're going on to our next item, which is, I believe, is our budget. Is that right, Nick?
Yes, that is right.
Okay, this is important. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to focus this presentation on the changes that have been made over the last month. We did present this a month ago, so I'm not going to go through the full 40 slides. And I'm also going to focus on speaking to some of the public comments that we got over the course of a public comment process. Slides are on their way. But while we're pulling them up, while we're pulling the slides up, I'll start to speak to sort of the major sort of differences. So in the last month, we have really refined some of our analysis around what we think the impacts of COVID-19 are on our revenues. If you recall, in May, when we presented it initially, our initial expectation was that there would be a pretty minimal financial impact of the reduction in energy consumption. But as we've refined that analysis, we have come up with really two scenarios. The first scenario, thank you. So let's go to second slide, please. Yes. Third slide, please. Yeah, perfect. The two scenarios are, one is what we're calling the COVID impacted load scenario, and the second is the non-COVID impacted load. The non-COVID impacted load was really in line with the scenario we presented in May. And it's one where we sort of assume that the economy will recover, businesses will start reopening quickly this summer, and we'll see minimal reductions in overall energy consumption in this coming fiscal year. The COVID impacted scenario is one where we see more persistent reductions as businesses do not reopen over the course of the next 3 to 6 months. So, the fundamental differences there is in the non-COVID impacted scenario, the primary action we took to achieve a balanced budget was reducing the discount from 1.5% to 1%, so a 0.5% discount. Whereas in the COVID impacted scenario, we found the need to have to reduce the discount further down to 0.5%. So that's the primary sort of, I think, sort of starting point for where we are. We feel like, we either need to reduce the discount by 0.5% or a full percent from, down to 1% or 0.5%. And it really is driven by kind of expectations around the economic recovery of COVID. And unfortunately, that's a very hard thing to forecast. So we are looking for direction from you, board. They are certainly, as we're looking for direction across the budget, across the board. That said, we did bring these items forward to the Finance and Administration Committee on Friday, and we're given direction to focus on, as our base case, the COVID impacted load, which, really reflects, I guess, more of a worst case scenario, or not a worst case, but a more down scenario for us. Underlying both of these, I'm just pulling up the right slides here on my computer, so we're in line. So just bear with me for one moment. Okay. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The other update to the base case between the COVID and the no COVID scenario is, and this is something we actually maintain for both, is a change to the approach we're taking for Brilliant 100. So for Brilliant 100, we last month had initially proposed setting a premium at 2.5%. Starting as early as July. That 2.5% is meant to reflect our cost of service for Brilliant 100. We have found that rate, it's more expensive to procure than we'd originally priced it. Based on some feedback at our last board meeting, where a number of you had asked that we think about bringing forward a proposal for the board to consider waiting to increase the cost of Brilliant 100 until at least September, to give local governments the chance to consider whether or not to change their default status. Upon further review, we felt that a better approach to take with Brilliant 100 is to maintain Brilliant 100 at its current pricing through the end of this year, instead of changing it, say, in September or October. But in doing so, modify the power content modestly to from the 40% renewable and 60% carbon free this year to 33% renewable and 67% carbon free, to help mitigate some of the cost impacts of the Brilliant 100 pricing. And then also take the step of closing the rate to new participants for the next 6 months. And what this would really do is give staff the opportunity to come back to the board in September with some options for how to proceed with Brilliant 100. Do we want to offer a 100% carbon-free rate that is priced a couple percent higher than PG&E? Do we want to eliminate the rate altogether and only offer two products, one that's cheaper and one that's more expensive? Or do we want to do something, something else entirely? And so, our sort of base case proposal is to pursue that approach, to give ourselves some time to think about Brilliant 100. And then finally, the final base case was a reduction in our marketing budget by an incremental $300,000, predominantly coming from some of the sponsorships and community grants. And that's meant to just further, tighten our belt when it comes to managing our costs. Next slide, please. So I think I spoke to this. I will also note that, underpinning the change to Brilliant 100 really is the need to have kind of quite a bit of dialogue with local governments in particular, who are looking at Brilliant 100 as a way to meet climate action plans. And so I think we do want to take the next couple of months to really have an in-depth dialogue about what the options are, to be able to determine what makes the most sense going forward. Next slide, please. So I'm actually not going to go through these slides again. I think we're going to go immediately to, I believe it's slide 17, which is our local development. Yep. So, this is obviously a topic of much discussion, how much we're funding local development. The one change we made to local development from last month to this month is we have reduced the EVIP. We're proposing to reduce the EVIP incentive by $230,000 from $4 million to little over 3.7 million dollars, but replace that reduction with a $275,000 grant that we have secured from one of our renewables counterparties who had committed to these funds in 2022, but we were able to negotiate them down to bring those funds this fiscal year. And that $275,000 is being allocated directly to increased funding of our COVID-19 relief efforts. So the net effect is actually a $45,000 increase in local development relative to the May budget presentation. I think one other thing that we did not highlight, which I think is really significant to be able to highlight, though, is in addition to our direct local development expenses, we are also forecasting about $4.7 million that we're going to be spending on our Summit Wind project in Alameda County. So in practice, while that $4.7 million is coming out of our energy procurement budget, practically speaking, that's $4.7 million that is going into Alameda County local clean energy projects. So when you take those two together, you're getting very close to $13 million, which relative to last year is almost double what we spent. Next slide, please. So this is sort of the enumeration of the local development categories. We talked about the EVIP, which was approved at our last meeting. We have demand response, energy efficiency, building electrification, and our Sunrun and NLX projects, which fit into our collaborative procurement. Next slide, please. As we think about, actually, I'm sorry, next slide, please. So, as stated, transportation electrification, it's predominantly our EVIP dollars, but we also are continuing to invest in site development, outreach and development. We're also looking at municipal fleets and heavy and medium duty electrification. Those efforts are still earlier days, so we're not yet sort of getting close to the deployment phase, whereas EVIP is really a deployment phase program. Those $125,000 investments are really about preparing ourselves for being able to deploy capital at the kind of scale we're planning to deploy for the EVIP program. Next slide, please. In building electrification, here too, we're still kind of in the early phases. We are offering one incentive program, our heat pump hot water incentive program, which is being implemented in concert with Stop Waste. We are continuing to support REACH code implementation. We are going to be pursuing the commercial induction cooking grants, which we put off last year. And we're generally supporting efforts to create much higher levels of awareness around electrification. Next slide, please. As mentioned, we have our solar and storage resilience program, which was just approved. So one thing that's important here to note is, while our local development budget here is only $400,000, that $400,000 really only represents the above market cost of the resource adequacy. So, we've established a principle here where we allocate in local development for the above market costs of local clean energy. The really sort of important thing about the solar and storage program is it is a very relative to traditional sources of resource adequacy, it's actually a quite financially attractive transaction. And so we're only expecting $400,000 in above market costs for this deployment of 10 megawatts. I think what's important there also to note is the leveraging that is happening. So for our $400,000, we're seeing millions and millions of total investment in Alameda County. I think across the whole program that was just approved, the NLX and Sunrun, I think we're forecasting in excess of $30 million of total investment in Alameda County at a cost of $400,000 a year. So that's a pretty attractive proposition. I'll highlight one other initiative here, and that's our Connected Communities program. While it's relatively small amount of funds, $50,000, our Connected Communities program is really focused on trying to develop new business models to help customers from being disconnected. And that may be education around the CARE discount, that may be trying to deploy solar on low-income residents' homes, and it's also doing sort of some data analytics to help try to come up with ways to better predict when customers may be facing challenges in their ability to pay, and then coming up with interventions before they get disconnected. Next slide, please. Okay, well, that's the quick overview of local development. So can we go to the slide on the community feedback on the budget, please? I think that's a different attachment. I'm sorry, I couldn't bite you. Right. So we held 2 webinars and an audio only session between last meeting and this meeting. Our webinar attendance, as you can see, we had 15 webinar attendees. We had 6 sets of verbal comments and 7 written comments. Next slide. Next slide, please. Great. Generally speaking, the comments were mostly focused on kind of general comments about the need to be mindful of the economic recession. There were comments on not wanting to reduce the local development budget. There were comments encouraging us to use reserves to offset the shortfall in the PCI in revenues from the PCIA. And there were comments proposing certain cost-cutting measures related to staffing and salaries and hiring. Next slide, please. There were a number of comments that were not directly related to the budget as well. Things, questions about, our Renewable 100 rate, the timelines for changes to Brilliant 100, and the need to maintain our base price lower than PG&E. Next slide, please. So, the one thing we did develop and we wanted to show, I think it's important to show here is, what are the consequences of changing our value proposition? What will consumers actually see when it comes to sort of changes in their electric bill? So what we, developed here is for our Bright Choice customers, we took 3 examples: residential, small commercial, and large commercial. And what you find is the difference between a 1.5% and a 0.5% discount. So, between maintaining the current status quo and adopting a COVID-driven scenario that would take our discount down to 0.5% is a 44-cent increase in the customer bill, the average customer bill. Similarly, for that small commercial customer, we're looking at a roughly $2.50 bill impact on a monthly basis, and then for your large commercial customer, you're talking about around $350 change. Next slide. So looking at Brilliant 100. Similarly, if we were to increase the rate from 0 to 2.5%, you'd be talking about a little over $1 increase per customer for residential, about $6, a little over $6 for small commercial, and a little less than $1,000 for a large commercial customer. But I think what is worth considering is, given that our current proposal, this would be if we were to adopt the increase today. If we maintain parity, obviously this would not occur this calendar year. Next slide, please. So if staff, so now we're getting to the questions about on the local development business plan. So one of the questions was, what would happen if $2.7 million was reduced from the local development business plan to, say, supplement the discount? And I'll note that $2.7 million represents roughly a 0.5% change in our value proposition. So, our response here is, it would be really up to the board. If the board wanted to reduce local development business plan, the board can direct staff to make those reductions, in the way it sees fit. I think from a staff perspective, if there were to be a large reduction in the local development business plan, we would likely suggest that reduction occur largely from the money we're setting aside for the EVIP program. We do have to fund this program to the tune of $14.5 million over 4 years. So if we were to reduce the funding from a little over 3.7 to, say, $1 million, what that would just mean is we have a greater liability in future years. And this gets to the second question around why is so much of the budget being allocated to the EVIP program. The budget's being allocated because we're trying to sort of fund this program fully in the next couple of years. So it's fully funded and it's able to achieve significant leverage. Our expectation is EVIP, if at 14.5 million of our contribution, will be able to leverage somewhere between $15 and $25 million of California Energy Commission funds, and then an additional $20 million of private investment. So that's turning 14.5 into almost $60 million of total incentives. And the last question here is about EVs and fleets, municipal and heavy duty. I think I noted, we're still in the early days of working on, especially our fleets and heavy and medium and heavy duty. And that is why you're not seeing significant infrastructure investment there. Those programs are still earlier stage relative to EVIP. Next question, please. Next slide, please. The first question is about our cost of power. Our cost of power is calculated based on taking our actual and projected costs and divided by a projected load. And that's how we get to the $55.28 per megawatt hour. On the question of our procurement, roughly 2/3 of our power is procured for the fiscal year, and that is in line with our risk management policies that the board approved. And the final question is about the term soft. Soft means low cost. Next slide, please. We did get some questions asking about the explicit costs of our energy portfolio. We treat those values as confidential per the California Public Utilities regulations. And so what we've presented here are the values that went into calculating the 2020 PCIA. These are forecast values that were set at the end of 2019, but I think they're largely illustrative of where the market is trading for these three products. Next slide. We did get a question about the relationship between procurement costs and our proposed rates. We're, at this point at a break-even budget, our costs largely reflect our rates. And I say largely because, it's some of our costs are not yet set. And so we're setting our rates based on expectations of cost. But our general proposition here is that we are setting rates based on our cost of service. Next slide. We did get a question about our best case budget scenario. I think what we've put forward as our base case, and there's sort of two versions of the base case. There's one where we sort of assume more reopening and one less reopening related to COVID. We don't really characterize those as worst case or best case. We think that is most likely, and that's why we're presenting it as such. In terms of our reserves, we are currently tracking more in the sort of 90 to 110 day range. And given that we're expecting a balanced budget this year, not one that offers significant margin, we're not currently forecasting significant contributions to our reserves from this fiscal year. So in November 2021. And then finally, the question is, what would happen to our reserves if we paid for, maintaining rates out of reserves? And I think the answer to that is our reserves would be diminished. Next slide. So why is Brilliant 100 changing but not Renewable 100? Brilliant 100 is changing because it does not currently recover all costs, whereas our current assessment is Renewable 100 does recoup its cost. And then we had a question about our value proposition relative to other CCAs. I think, we do speak to this, and we've spoken to this before. I think generally, part of the reason why our value proposition may be less than other CCAs is one, we're newer. So Peninsula Clean Energy, for example, is maintaining a 5% discount. They launched before us, and so there's some structural advantages to that launch. But there are CCAs like Sonoma Clean Power. They're currently offering rates that are between 2 and 4% higher than PG&E's. MCE's rates are currently between 1 to 0% lower than PG&E, so very much in line with what we're proposing. A number of CCAs are going through their value proposition setting over the coming months, and I do expect many of them will set discounts that are more in line with what we're proposing today. Next slide, please. So what are what's our projected power mix going to look like this year? So for 2019, we're currently estimating that our power mix will be around 110 pounds per megawatt hour, which is below our emissions benchmark of 142 pounds per megawatt hour. So we're very pleased about exceeding our benchmark for 2019. But going into 2020, I think there's some open questions. We have changed our approach to procurement, so really focusing on renewables instead of carbon-free, and two, we're waiting to see how much hydro flows from the allocation for PG&E. So unfortunately, it's really too early for us to state where we think our emissions benchmark for 2020 is going to land. Next slide, please. I think that might be it.
That is the end of the slideshow.
Great. So I guess what I want to just sort of leave you with is this. I think the current staff base case budget is one, seeks to achieve a balanced budget. So one where revenues and costs are largely equal to one another. We're seeking to reduce our discount to either 1% or 0.5%. Based on direction, based on an either more or less optimistic view about business recovery, and we are seeking to hold steady with Brilliant 100 through the end of the year, while closing the rate to new customer participation and slightly reducing the share of renewables relative to carbon free, and then coming back to the board in the coming months with a recommendation for how that might change. That is my presentation.
There we go. Okay, thank you, Nick. Appreciate it very much. We have some decisions to make and maybe a few options. I do want to hear from the speakers, but before we hear from our public speakers, and by the way, just the speakers get a heads up, because of the late time, I'm going to give each speaker 1.5 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds. And I'm going to ask if any of our board members have any initial questions or initial comments prior to hearing the speakers. Not required, but just in case you do. I see Ed Hernandez from San Leandro.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank Nick and his team for doing a great job and looking to have a balanced budget. He presented it really well with the rest of his team during the Finance Committee meeting and really had some thoughtful and good discussion around there, understanding the difference and the recommendation from that committee to go with the COVID example, to have that balanced budget. And although not as great as before, we still have some challenges moving forward. So very grateful for the work you've done here. Very happy that you've done that public outreach, and we'll see better days with more investment in our community in the future. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, Councilmember Hannon from Newark. Yeah, let's see. Do we need to unmute him? Mike, can you unmute yourself?
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead. There you go.
Nick, being one of the newer members, can you just clarify for me when you talk about the 0.5% or the 1% discount, does that discount, is that reflected after the PCIA is assessed by PG&E?
Yes, it is. So it is our rates plus the PCIA are 1.5%, 1 or 0.5% less than the PG&E rate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised one way or the other. So, Madam Clerk, we're going to call the speakers and they'll each get 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Thank you. Be just a moment. Ready to have people start queuing up. I have Steve Ongarth. Oops, apologies. Richard Rollins, Terry Taplin, Ingor Traub, Melissa Yu, Quinn He, Beth Weinberger, Jessica Tovar, Michael Kaufman, Crystal Huang, Colin Miller, Tom Kelly, Jada Dumas Drogan, Audrey Ichinose, David McCord, Alita Dupree, and Blair Beekman.
Okay. And who we have first? Is Colin first? Is he the one listed I see first? Or was it any order?
Yes, Colin will be first.
Okay.
Colin, you are unmuted.
Good evening, Chair Kalb and board members. My name is Colin Miller with the Oakland Climate Action Coalition. And we are calling in today to support the East Bay Clean Power Alliance's call for funding the local development business plan fully, which is our Green New Deal for the East Bay. We support the East Bay Clean Power Alliance's demands to phase out EBCE's Brilliant 100, which is an offering of carbon-free energy, is a false solution to climate change and displaces true clean energy development. Anyone who wants to do better for the community and climate can opt up to Renewable 100 for true clean energy. Any approaches to climate that only focus on reducing carbon actually perpetuate more environmental racism in our communities and uplifts dangerous and often greenwashed sources of energy, such as nuclear, for example. We are at a time of reckoning and truth-telling about the pernicious legacy of slavery of African Americans, a legacy that continues today through legalized slavery and racist police brutality. I want to invite you as board members to consider how you can leverage the power you have as representatives of our public community agency to ensure that our public dollars flow to Black and Brown residents first, through cooperative ownership and wealth building opportunities in local clean energy projects. Do your part to vote for full funding to address the massive racial wealth gap. Black Lives Matter, supporting the movement is about more than confronting police brutality. We're counting on you to vote your values and the values of those you represent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Alita Dupree, your microphone is unmuted.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Chair Kalb and members. Alita Dupree for the record. Lots of good things. I think it's reasonable. It should be a living document. The value proposition is very, very important. We have to stay competitive and have at least Right Choice be below PG&E, because you're always going to have a subset of people who are going to say, why should I pay more here when I can pay it the same thing for less somewhere else. So we have to ensure that value proposition. I would, of course, like to see higher levels of renewables. That's going to take some time. But again, I think having a three-tiered buffet of possibilities is essential. You know, there is progress. I mean, ideally, I'd like for everybody to be able to buy renewable energy. That's what I choose to do. But we have to make sure that we include everybody. So something is better than nothing. It's very important that we pay our people, pay them according to the posted pay scale, especially because this is a challenging time. Consider that military pay scales are set by law. So when troops go to war, they receive things like hazard duty pay and tax exemptions. So we need to make sure that all of our staff get paid, especially because they are stepping up in this challenging time. So continue this work. It's important that we pass this budget because that gives us the legal authority to spend money and do the things we need to do to invest in a greener and cleaner Alameda County and Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Igor Treb, your microphone is unmuted.
Hi, thank you so much, Chair Kalb, members of the board. I'm Igor Tregup, immediate past chair of the Sierra Club San Francisco Bay chapter. I have 4 points to make today. First of all, thank you, Nick, for the presentation. We do hope that going forward, there would be continued and increased transparency in budgeting and rate setting. That does require even more detailed information than what was provided, so that the board and the public can be better informed about the GHG content and renewable portfolio standard of the 3 products for EBCE. Second, this is not the time for rate increases. The estimated unemployment rate in California is 25%, up from about 5% in early March. And with so many people affected by the pandemic, we think that EBC's priorities for the budget should be to find ways to cut costs so that programs in low carbon content can be maintained without increasing rates. Thirdly, we support the East Bay Clean Power Alliance ask for no cuts and a fully funded local development business plan. And finally, we feel that more scenario analysis is warranted. A reduction to the LGBP budget was essentially the only alternative scenario presented by staff. And we felt that options should include reducing the reserve allocation, using the rate stabilization reserve, etc. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you.
This is Jessica of East Bay Clean Power Alliance, and we support the phase out of Brilliant 100. We also support decreasing the discount for Bright Choice, because if a household residential ratepayer saves $10 at the end of the year, that's nothing compared to creating clean energy jobs and building local energy assets, energy wealth, community resilience, and better health in our communities. So for that, we also support that the local development business plan not be cut, but should actually be increased, because that is where our East Bay would actually feel the benefits of this program. I'd like to echo some of the requests from the Community Advisory Committee that we also use equity metrics to measure the results of the local development to ensure that these benefits are reaching our most vulnerable communities throughout Alameda County and City of Tracy. We recommend using reserve funds and want to just highlight that a pandemic and the PCIA increases are a justified crisis. And I will also echo from the Community Advisory Committee that nuclear energy should never be considered again, should never be on the table for our program.
Thank you. And we have next speaker coming up. Is this Steve?
Yes, hi. Hi, my name is Steve Ongerth, and I want to echo the comments made by Jessica Tovar, Igor Treyeb, and Colin Miller. Please do not cut the local community business development plan. I am a union member who campaigns very diligently on just transition, and one of the things that's very important in creating just transition frameworks is being able to point to concrete examples of it. The local community business development plan is an example of that, and if you cut it, it makes our work much harder. So please do not cut that in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I think I'm going next. Okay, Jada Durmaz-Dogan, again with Local Clean Energy Alliance. I urge the board to reject any cuts to the local development business plan. Also, I would like to talk about the impacts of PCAA. EBC is facing over a 60 million net position reduction by the end of fiscal year 2021. It's clear that the major problem is the huge increase in the PCAA. I couldn't find any detailed information in this month's presentation about how PCAA affects EBC's revenues. However, in January and February, CEO Chesed presented to the board that EBC forecasts a significant impact on revenues driven both by direct increase in PCAA and associated reductions in PG&E's rates. It's mentioned in the January presentation that it may result in a 28% decrease in EBCE revenues relative to the status quo. EBC may not be able to do much to prevent the adverse impacts of the pandemic, and hopefully things will get better soon. However, I think EBC can do something to prevent the adverse impacts of PCAA, and it won't go away unless the CCAs work together with the community organizations to fight against it. We recommend that EBC advocate for and recruit other CCAs to join in an all-out battle to defeat the current configuration of the PCAA. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I guess I'm next. Hello, good evening again. Crystal Huang from People Power Solar Cooperative, representing close to 100 member owners in the EBC territory. We all know very well that we need to decarbonize quickly to slow down climate change, as well as the economic difficulties many are in. In order to address climate emergency, we have to make sure everyone can participate. And now, with greater awareness of systemic racism in the United States and around the world, from the spread of the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd, as well as countless others before and after him, it's time to address the connection between racial justice and climate solutions in this country. This is a critical opportunity for us to be doubling down on the pride of the East Bay area, that is our local Green New Deal, also known as the Local Development Business Plan. At this critical moment for our society to reckon with the injustice and oppression faced by the Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities every day, we need to deeply reflect how we are spending community dollars. At this point, the least the board can do is to begin rejecting the false solution to climate change that displaces true clean energy development to revitalize our local communities. We really appreciate EBC's direction to move away from carbon-free to focus on renewable project. We recommend you to phase out Brilliant 100 and commit to never consider nuclear energy again. We support the idea to decrease the discount for Bright Choice, as well as utilizing the equity metric to measure the results of our local investment. We support East Bay Clean Power Alliance. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think I'm next. My name is Audrey Ichinose again. As we all know, EVIP has pretty much will dominate our budget for the next 4 years. And because of this inordinate commitment, EBCE needs to supplement local development funds in order to strengthen the social equity measures we need to undertake in this area. In my comment to item 15, I suggested donating solar plus storage systems to low-income residents, including institutions like churches in disadvantaged areas that support homeless programs. This kind of action would be quicker, more direct, and in achieving positive outcomes in disadvantaged communities. And obviously, it's this kind of effort. If we undertake this kind of effort, we need more funds in the local development budget. So thank you very much. Please do your best to reduce the systemic bias in our system against poor and disadvantaged areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments. And let's see, who do we have next here? Is that Richard Rollins?
Yes. Thank you. I'd like to express my thanks to you as directors for guiding EBCE staff and for representing your constituents on the EBC board. As such, it's up to you to be certain that the benefits associated with our CCA are actually realized and that the promises made as EBCE was formed are fulfilled. In that regard, I have some direct and simple questions for each of you as directors about the proposed budget. Is it the best that EBCE can do for your constituents? Does it represent the values of your jurisdiction? Does the budget respond to the financial hardships forced upon your jurisdiction by the COVID-19 pandemic and the resultant unemployment among your constituents? When I look at the proposed budget, here's what I see. More carbon emissions than last year, reduced renewable content, increasing rates, increasing EBCE personnel costs, a CEO bonus, and a lack of sensitivity to the multiple crises impacting our communities. To me, it seems that EBCE might be evolving into a mini PG&E. Thank you for your consideration of my comments.
Thank you. And next speaker, I believe it's Beth Weinberger. Beth, can you unmute yourself? Or Madam Clerk, have we unmuted this person? We have a little bit of a glitch here.
Okay, I think I've managed to do it.
There you go.
Yeah. This is Beth Weinberger speaking on behalf of Kahila Community Synagogue and Alameda County Congregation of 500 households. We are especially concerned about and oppose any cuts to the local development business plan, which is the heart and soul of our Community Choice Energy program. Preserving it and funding it well are much more important than minimal increases in rates. The LDBP's capacity to create local clean energy jobs and promote and support local businesses is even more important in the current economic crisis caused by the pandemic. We strongly oppose investing almost 70% of the LDBP budget exclusively in an EV program, as individual EVs are a luxury item unaffordable to low-income communities. Unless this investment is aimed primarily at public transit vehicles, trucking fleets, and the like, this proposed earmark would be discriminatory against low income and communities of color. Given that budget shortfalls in this budget year are largely due to the global pandemic, why isn't a portion of the estimated $73 million in emergency reserves being used to help make up the shortfalls? And given that the other
Okay, thank you. And let's see, do we have any more speakers, Madam Clerk? I see one more or two more. I see.
Been
Michael?
unmuted. Thank you. I'm a member of Communities for a Better Environment and the local Clean Energy Alliance, and I'm here speaking to urge you to not cut the local development budget. This pandemic and the economic crisis is harming communities of color and small businesses especially. My understanding is that you have reserve funds of many, many millions of dollars that can be used to supplement whatever losses you think are coming from PG&E's raising the rates. Please do not cut the local development budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Second call for Terry Taplin, Melissa Yu, Quinn He, Tom Kelly. You're using a dial-in call. Please press #9 to raise your hand. Chair called, there's no response.
Okay, let's see. We see Quinn. If I mispronounce this, Quinn He. I see your name there. If you're there, there you go.
There we go.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, my name is Quinn He, and I'm representing youth advocates for New Voices Are Rising under the Rose Foundation. The core values within the local development business plan to empower local Alameda County residents resonate with our messages, and we see that its benefits far outweigh the small monetary gain a bigger discount for right choice would give. To protect our most underrepresented and disadvantaged demographics, we should be striving for optimal protection. This would be in future regards such as making Renewable 100 a forefront and competitive rate to PG&E's current bills. In contributing to long-term community resilience, we hope that the equity measures submitted uphold standards that disintegrate the shackles of systemic environmental racism on all platforms. Decreasing Bright Choices discount to 0.5% will offer additional support to build legacies of local assets and educational training, abiding by missions to redistribute the ownership of energy and prosperity back into the hands of the working people. I hope we share similar beliefs to not expose our community to risky ventures and instead use this budget to directly aid low-income and people of color. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, the other names have been called, and we're not seeing anybody raise their hand or their microphone. Give it another few seconds. I know we've all received, Madam Clerk, is that right? We've all received some written comments in advance.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so some of the people may have just decided to submit written comments. Okay, so I see one. Is that one person raising their hand? I'm not seeing it. Okay, so we're going to go to board members. Let's see. I see the order here. We'll have first with Councilmember Mandel and then Supervisor Haggerty.
Thank you, Chair Kolb. So, I sit on the executive committee and the finance committee, and both of them have reviewed the budget a number of times and sort of guided us to along with staff, obviously, to the recommendation that's been put forward. And I want to acknowledge the really significant improvement in our budgeting process this year. Leaps and bounds improvements in terms of the discussion and the process and the procedures and the multiple meetings. So I really want to thank staff for that, our CEO especially, and the finance team. Really good work. And given the lateness of the hour, I will end my remarks there with a motion to approve staff recommendation for the COVID scenario.
If I can second it. Hernandez from San Leandro.
Okay, I think we'll have some clarifying questions, but Supervisor Haggerty, you're up.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the COVID scenario here. I just want to be perfectly clear. You know, I think I attended one of the first meetings of EBCE many years ago, and it has always been a promise to our ratepayers. Maybe Al's going to argue with me, but you would always be 1.5%, which I always thought was not even getting there, but 1.5% cheaper than PG&E. And I always felt we should be more. We've been telling, as I've talked to cities about coming into EBCE, I've been telling them that. And, you know, when I went down and testified in front of Pleasanton, I told them that. This budget's not going to make a hypocrite out of me. I'm not going to change. I think we should send this budget back. And, you know, I know people don't want nuclear. They don't want to take cuts to the local business development plan, on and on and on. But yet we're going to take the people who pay the rates that pay for all this stuff. We're going to make them pay more during this time. I can't support that. I just cannot support, and that's okay. If you all can do it, it can be another vote where I'm just the lone no vote. I'm fine with that. But I feel like I've told people that they'd be 1.5%, and that's the way I feel. The hour's late. I'll keep my mouth shut. Y'all do what you want, make your motions, and I'll vote no.
Thank you. Sorry. Mayor Pilch.
Thank you, Chair. So I do appreciate the process as well. I do appreciate that the public comment was reviewed in the presentation in detail, and I appreciate staff's taking its time with Brilliant 100 as Director Mandal and myself, and perhaps I think our representative from Piedmont is here. Know we care about this product very much, and we're glad we're taking our time in deciding what to do with it. Our cities have used that, as was mentioned, to try to address our climate action goals. So with that said, I think I can support Director Mandal's motion, and I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Jane, our Community Advisory Committee representative.
Thank you, Chair Kalb. I'll just speak briefly to the discussion points around this item during Monday evening's CAC meeting. In general, we are just appreciative of staff and all their efforts in bringing forth this budget. The CAC unanimously approved 2 motions in relationship to this item. The first was that the CAC supports the phase out of Brilliant 100 and the discount rate of 0.5% for Bright Choice, and recommends including an equity impact analysis in the allocation of Cal EVIP funds to address the uneven benefits of the EV infrastructure. I want to point out too that in our May meeting we did support Cal EVIP, but do at this point call for an equity impact analysis as really addressing the needs of the community. Furthermore, the CAC recommends that the nuclear option is not entertained as its potential to generate $2 million in savings is dubious, and accepting nuclear has already been rejected by the public. We also passed the second motion in which the CAC recommends that the board seek an additional $1 to $2 million of funding allocation without invoking the nuclear option for the LDBP to increase equity and spending beyond the Cal EVIP program, which does not reach Alameda County's most vulnerable communities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I thought I saw Jesse's hand up, but not any longer. Oh, I do see it. Okay, Jesse, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a question to Director Mendel. Is there a reason why you're proposing the COVID option? Do you believe that we should budget for projected decreases over the next few months? I'm just trying to understand the purpose behind your motion, because
Sure.
it's the difference between 1% and 0.5%. So I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was brief, but my reasoning basically is twofold, and I think this surfaced a lot in some of the committee discussions as well. The COVID scenario is probably more realistic in terms of our expectations for load. I think that, me personally, I don't believe we're going to see this rapid, huge bounce back in a V-shaped recovery. I think it's more realistic to expect a longer, slower recovery. And so the COVID scenario is more logical for that reason, but also because it preserves, funding for us to fund the local development business plan, not just this year, but in future years. And we know the PCIA is going up. We know we're going to, I'm very sympathetic to the view that Director Haggerty outlined. I'd love to be able to offer a much bigger discount, but the reality is that the PCIA is going to continue to go up and going to continue to squeeze our ability to provide the 1.5%. And so it's essential to me that we do maintain a discount from PG&E, and the 0.5% does do that, even though it's not as generous as we would like. So those are my reasonings.
Okay, thank you. Chair Calt, I think you're muted.
There we go. Thank you very much. So to Nick, just to clarify for me and anybody who happens to be listening among the attendees, the difference between the COVID scenario in the presentation and the non-COVID scenario is the most prevalent, the most obvious difference is the difference between a 1%, going from 1.5 to 1% discount on Bright Choice versus going from 1.5 to 0.5% discount on Bright Choice. That's one clear difference. Can you remind us if there are other differences in the two scenarios that we're choosing from?
That is yes, that is the difference. There really is not any other major difference. It really, and I think our challenge in presenting one as kind of like our preferred versus not is the drivers are really things that are outside, one, of our control, and two, are really even outside of our expertise to forecast. What is the rate of business reopening over the next 3 months? I don't know. Conservative approach would be assume they don't open as quickly, and if they do, well, then we'll have some more upside that we can perhaps use for future discounts. But there's a perfectly reasonable argument to say that they will reopen and load will come back, and that's why we didn't present one as preferred.
So let me ask another question. If I remember the graphic, the presentation we just saw. When it comes to commercial customers, not the really small businesses, but I mean the larger commercial customers that have some very large bills, the difference between 1% discount and a 0.5% discount for them over a lengthy period they might consider that meaningful to them. The average household probably is not going to notice a difference, maybe, but still less than PG&E, and they're not going to notice it. It's not going to, for the most part. But those larger customers might notice it. Well, could that lead to a few of them deciding to leave us and looking at whatchamacallit, the free? I'm sorry.
PG&E?
No, not
Direct
PG&E.
access?
direct access. I'm sorry, it's late. I'm sorry. Could it lead some larger businesses to move to direct access and we lose them altogether?
I'm not too worried about the direct access risk because one, to the degree that we've seen customers get the direct access ticket, they're not thinking about staying with us because of our 1.5% discount. They often will choose to take it because of all of the flexibility it gives them. And the customers who we have retained from direct access, it's because we've offered them special rates. So I wouldn't necessarily see it as being an issue. I think the primary issue is, less discount, less differentiation from PG&E. It's still a discount. So would a large business leave even a couple $1,000s on the table when there's no other meaningful difference in terms of the quality of their service and it's more renewable? I would hope not.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, let's see. Mayor Arguin, do you have another question or comment?
So would this increase impact CARE or FARA customers, or are they exempt?
This would affect all of our customers.
Okay.
The CARE discount is not on our bill charge; it's on the PG charge.
And then, if we kept the value proposition at 1% for Bright Choice, what are some other options that we can look at to close the deficit? How much are we dipping into the reserves, for example, to balance the budget? Are we doing any reserve drawdown, or?
We're currently not doing any reserve drawdown. And I think, our goal really there was we wanted, as we're working towards a credit rating, we want to demonstrate that, we're doing everything we possibly can to avoid drawing into our reserves. And then using reserves for if we're seeing, an inter-year shortfall, if costs end up being higher than they actually are, well, we have these reserves ready to sort of make up for that gap. But reserves would be one option. I think, it's either tap into reserves or find other reductions. We also did, took an approach where we try to look to achieve a balanced budget without accounting for the integration of the three new communities. And part of the reason we wanted to do that was we didn't want to find ourselves in a position where we're structurally $1 or $2 million in the red. And we're like, okay, well, the new communities are coming in, so they're going to bring us back to parity. There's more uncertainty around the new communities because we still have to buy energy for them. So we wanted to have the economic proposition of the new communities to the rest of the program to be very clearly positive. And it is right now, which is great, but there's just more uncertainty there than we have for the communities that we serve. And so that's why we tried to reach parity for the core 12 communities.
So just a clarification question. Does the non-COVID budget scenario have an impact on the local development budget?
No.
Okay.
No.
I just want to state for the record, I am concerned about increasing the value proposition beyond 1%, particularly for residential ratepayers as well as for commercial customers. Our existing businesses, whether they be large or small, are really impacted by this pandemic, as well as our residential customers, some of whom have lost their jobs or seen a significant reduction in income. And I'm just concerned about the timing of this, which makes us less attractive to PG&E. And if we are facing some dramatic situation at some point 6 months from now, we can always reevaluate, and that's the reason we have reserves. But I guess I just want to state my concern about going beyond the sort of the promise that we had made to ratepayers that we would be more competitive from PG&E. 0.5% is not that much more competitive from PG&E. So I just want to state that for the record.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I share those very same thoughts. I see Councilmember Hernandez from San Leandro.
Thank you, Chair. I think we could also address the uncollectibles. I mean, I think that's a $9.7 million number. or 2.5% of the revenues. So I think we might get some more guidance about how terrible or how maybe not as great it might be with PG&E releasing some information on their uncollectibles July 1st. So if that is not as terrible, because I think we're being a little conservative there, it could be not as high, because you could see it wasn't as much as the percent in the last budget. There might be opportunity to look at this. So it just depends how those uncollectibles are. I mean, I'm committed to looking at this budget again in 6 months, and can we, if it looks like it's more favorable, can we then reinvest more into our local development business plan? So I think right now we're being conservative, and this is not the end of our budget. I think it's an ever-living document, but we want to be financially responsible and do what we can. And for one of the comments I heard, as I understood it, some of the EV vehicles, start and stops, do happen, and some of them are multi-unit developments or low-income communities where they might be part of a rideshare program, but don't really have a place to charge their vehicle. So I think that's what I heard arguments early on about EV, but I'm very supportive of understanding that equity analysis of where we're placing it, who is using the infrastructure once it's up and going. So maybe we do look at this budget in 6 months, and if we can bring more to the community, then that'll be great. I think those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Nick, I think I don't see any more hands. Mary Regine again, go ahead.
Well, we're presented with two options. We have going to 1% for Bright Choice and going to 0.5 for Bright Choice. I think going to 1% is better than going to 0.5%, given the impact it's going to have on our ratepayers and our competitiveness and our ability to retain customers. So I guess I'd like to make a substitute motion to approve the budget with the non-COVID scenario.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
We got a motion, substitute motion that's been duly seconded. Nick, I have another question about the comparison, obviously. So obviously nobody here wants to reduce the local development business plan funding, so that's not an option. You've already stated in both those scenarios what you would like to do with the Brilliant 100 for the time being, so that's the same. So other than the reserve, the only thing I could think of that might be another choice to make, not a good choice, but is to freeze X number of vacant positions you have on staff or are going to have on staff, and freeze them for 6 months or a year. I don't want to do that, but that is also a choice to meet that gap. But maybe that choice is too many positions to meet the gap. Maybe it's not one or two, maybe it's well over that, and therefore it's not realistic. But could you just give an honest reflection on that?
Yeah, so our current budget scenario includes no additional hires relative to our staffing levels set in our last fiscal year. So you approved a staffing level of 37 employees. This budget has proposed staff of 37 employees. Our current staffing is 33 employees. We actually just hired our 34th employee, who's starting in 2 weeks. We have 2 other positions that we're seeking to hire. These are in one case this is a backfill position, and well, I guess we hired a backfill, and these are 2 new positions that we've been seeking to hire for over a year. So we're really, a hiring freeze, any sort of change to personnel, the cost benefits that you would achieve are, low hundreds of thousands of dollars, $100,000, $150,000 relative to, $2.7 million. The opportunities you have, I think, really are reduce sort of the large funding buckets. If you want to get back to 1.5%. At 1%, I think it's really just a question of COVID versus non-COVID. And I can't make a recommendation as to which one is more accurate, because there's a lot of noise in the data that we have. We are actually seeing some recovery in usage. But what if there's a second way? There's so much noise. I can't say, yeah, I recommend this or I recommend that.
Yeah, we understand. This is new for everybody. The predictions are hard already, and this situation is even harder. Okay, so thank you for that response. I see no more hands up. So I'm going to ask for a roll call vote, Madam Clerk, on the substitute motion, which is the what we're calling the non-COVID scenario, which is the moving from 1.5 to 1% for Bright Choice.
Thank you. Alameda County.
Pass. I'm tired of going first.
Albany.
Yes.
Berkeley.
Yes.
Dublin.
Yes.
Emeryville.
Yes.
Fremont.
Yes.
Hayward.
No.
Livermore.
Yes.
Newark.
Yes.
Pleasanton.
Yes.
San Leandro.
Yes.
Tracy.
Yes.
Union City.
Yes.
Oakland.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay.
You didn't
thank
call
you.
Alameda County.
Oh,
Oh, Alameda County.
No.
Thank you.
okay. Thank you for that roll call vote, everybody. Okay. Thank you for that. Nick, you have your budget. Did we have any more agenda items? Was that it?
We have one very quick agenda item. It's our legal services contract. So each year we seek to extend a number of legal services contracts. We wanted to put this after the budget because we didn't want to come forward with an extension of contracts without an approved budget. So now that the budget is approved, this item would seek to adopt a resolution authorizing me to go and negotiate and execute contract extensions with 7 law firms who we've been working with over the course of the last 1 to 2 years.
Madam Clerk, do we have any public speakers on this item?
Yes, I have Blair Beekman.
Okay, let's come on up. And that'll be 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Hi, I don't have any comment on this item. Thanks for the meeting tonight.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. And I believe we're not seeing any other speakers. I don't see any of those. Okay. Colleagues, any questions on this item, or do I have, I'd like to entertain a motion here?
So moved.
Moved by, who is that, Ed?
Anton.
Seconded.
And seconded by Dan. Okay. Al, do you have a question?
Nope.
No, okay. I see no more comments or questions. Madam Clerk, you can take a roll call vote on this, please.
Would Alameda County still like to go last?
I don't know. I just think sometimes you should start in the middle, or you should start at the end and work the other way. But Alameda County feels this is relatively non-controversial and will go first and say yes.
Thank you. Berkeley.
Berkeley votes yes.
Dublin.
Yes.
And I skipped Albany, so we'll come back. Albany.
And I'm very happy to be near the front. Yes.
Thank you. Emeryville.
Yes.
Fremont.
Yes.
Hayward.
Yes.
Livermore.
I'm tempted to filibuster, but yes.
Newark.
Yes.
Pleasanton.
Yes.
San Leandro.
Yes, we'll spin the wheel next time. Thank you.
Yes. Tracy.
Yes.
Union City.
Yes.
Oakland.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much. And I believe, we just have let me go to the agenda. Any comments or questions or announcements? I should say any announcements from board members or from staff. And, oh, I know, I did have one. And I think I mentioned this to a few people already. I'm making a request if people could check their schedules and let Stephanie know. She'll probably send out an email. I'm hoping we could start the retreat at 4 o'clock on Wednesday, July 1st, if we keep that date. I have a conflict at 7 o'clock that evening, and the retreat could go 3 hours possibly. So I would request a 4 o'clock start time. If people could check their calendars and let Stephanie know this week, that'd be great. Any other board or staff announcements?
I believe Director Ariola raised his
I'm
hand.
sorry. Yes, Director Ariola from Tracy.
Very quickly, I just wanted to say we have a very different demographic here in the Central Valley, but on behalf of San Joaquin County and as the only LGBT council member in our county, just happy Pride this June. Thank you.
Happy Pride, absolutely.
Yay.
Thank you.
Happy Pride.
Yes.
Yep. Happy Pride.
Okay, seeing no other hands being waved virtually or emotionally here, I guess we will now adjourn this meeting. Happy Pride to all. Everybody stay safe and have a great rest of the week. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.